Chapter 1051. Speaking of Children's Day in the United States, there is a story. Although the whole world, except for Wuxia, doesn't celebrate Children's Day on June 1st, each country has its own Children's Day. For example, in Japan, May 5th is Boys' Day and March 3rd is Girls' Day. Watching some anime, parents often put dolls for the girls at home. South Korea's Children's Day is also May 5th, Canada's is August 15th, Thailand's is the second Saturday of January, Turkey's is April 23rd, Germany's is September 20th, Singapore's is October 1st, the United Kingdom's is July 14th, Spain's is January 5th, India's is November 14th, Switzerland's is November 23rd, Mexico's is April 30th, Peru's is April 28th, Hungary's is the last Sunday of May, etc. Because every country has a Children's Day but the United States doesn't. In fact, it can't be said that it doesn't exist because the laws of each state are different, so Children's Day is not on the same day in each state. In 2000, a 4-year-old girl wrote a letter to the then-President Clinton, who was involved in the Monica Lewinsky scandal, saying that she hoped to have a National Children's Day. Clinton set October 8th as the National Children's Day in the United States, but later, when George W. Bush came to power, he overturned this point. However, George W. Bush also decided to give children a holiday, so he changed it to June. June 3rd is the National Children's Day, but later, Americans felt that it was too undemocratic to set a date for the holiday. Look at the holidays in the United States, none of them have a fixed date. Christmas and New Year's Day are not counted, they must have a fixed date. In addition to these holidays from Europe, those unique to the United States, such as Thanksgiving Day, have no fixed date. Thanksgiving Day, Labor Day, etc., all of them have no fixed date. Basically, it is a Sunday in a certain month or some other time, and it is basically different every year. It is very free. The same is true for children. Currently, Children's Day in the United States is the second Sunday in June, but Jiang Hai really didn't pay attention to it. Because no one asked him to take them to celebrate Children's Day before. Besides, are they children? Looking at the 3 girls in front of him, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows and asked with some doubts, "Are you children?" "Why not? We're not even 18 yet." After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana straightened her chest as she watched Jiang Hai seriously. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai revealed a bitter smile. 17 years old is still a child? Looking at the 3 girls beside him, Jiang Hai shook his head and asked, "Of course we're still girls. Why don't you help us break that thing? If it breaks, we won't be able to pass." Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marian giggled and sat on Jiang Hai's lap. As she spoke, she wiped the corner of her clothes. All right. I'm afraid of you. If you want to go out and play, just say it. Tell me, where do you want to go tomorrow?" Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai waved his hand directly. "Are you kidding me? He has persisted for more than 1,000 chapters. There is no need to lose his integrity at this time." Looking at the 3 girls in front of him, Jiang Hai said to them, "Okay, we have already thought about it. We are going to the amusement park tomorrow, we are going to the cinema, we are going diving, we are going to ride a motorboat, and..." Hearing Jiang Hai directly reject their proposal, the 3 girls couldn't help but pout, but they recovered in the next second. Then they told Jiang Hai where they were going tomorrow. Stop, you think too much. We don't have that much time. We can go motorboat and diving at any time. It doesn't matter. Let's go to the amusement park and watch a movie tomorrow." Hearing the words of the 3, Jiang Hai thought for a while and said, "Although the coral reefs in Jiang Hai's fishing ground are not as beautiful as the coral reefs in Australia, but in recent years, with Jiang Hai's intention to help expand the coral reefs, and at the same time he brought back colorful corals from the south several times. Now his coral reefs are not as bare and gray as they were a few years ago, and there are some colorful corals. Purple, red, yellow, pink, blue, there are all kinds of colors. If the weather is good, it is quite good to go down and look. Usually, Jiang Hai likes to play there when he goes to the sea to catch seafood. Chi Jie and the others have also gone diving, but for these girls, because Jiang Hai is concerned about their safety, he did not let them dive. So they have only seen the photos taken by Chi Jie and the others. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that they were still young, but now it seems that they have grown up unknowingly. It is time to let them dive, of course, with his accompaniment. Okay. Hearing that Jiang Hai agreed, the 3 girls also laughed, then quickly ran back to the villa, leaving Jiang Hai to lie there and continue to play games, but after being teased by Marian just now, he seems to be a little impulsive. Sitting up, he glanced around and just saw Jialina, carrying a bucket of fresh milk and walking to the villa. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. After sitting up from the recliner, he quickly walked to her side. "Let's go." Walking to Jialina's side, Jiang Hai took her hand and walked to the shadow behind the house. Hey, there is still milk. Seeing Jiang Hai pulling her away, Jialina couldn't help but say in a panic. It's okay, I will give you fresh milk. Hearing Jialina's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile in front of her. Hearing what he said, Jialina's face couldn't help but blush. They were an old couple. How could she not understand what Jiang Hai meant? She rolled her eyes at him, but she didn't stop him. After putting the milk bucket on a flat position, she was pulled into the corner by Jiang Hai. Not long after, in the corner, there was the sound of water, followed by heavy breathing. From the shadow of the sun, it could be seen that a person put one leg on the shoulder of another person, and the other leg stood on the ground, forming a split. As for what they were doing, no one knew. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai set off for Boston with Delina, Marian, and Taraga. Because it was now the middle of June, the temperature outside was also rising rapidly. The hottest time of the day was even 26 or 27 degrees. Naturally, including Jiang Hai, the other girls also changed into summer clothes. Since being guided by Selena Gomez last time, Taraga now also had some interest in makeup, clothing, and the like. Usually he would also read fashion magazines and talk to Selena Gomez on the phone. Now Delina and Marian were dressed according to Taraga's style. Because they were going to the amusement park today, it was important for them to dress casually. The three girls weren't short, so they could say goodbye to high heels. They were all wearing the kind of sneakers that exposed their long legs, but their clothes were different. Tarag was wearing a shirt that was a little tight, as if she had deliberately worn it a size smaller. It perfectly displayed the two things that could not be described, which were not small to begin with. Her stomach was also short, and one could see a very healthy Apollo's belt. She was wearing a pair of hot pants. According to her, the pants were cool to wear. Delina was wearing a very loose t-shirt, half of her shoulder could be seen when she pulled it to the side. A rope was tied around her waist as a belt, which not only didn't make her look bloated, but also showed the advantages of her thin waist and long legs. She was wearing a pair of jeans, which also showed her long legs. What Marian was wearing was probably the most normal, but it was also the most abnormal. She was wearing a school uniform, but that school uniform, it was a bit like the kind worn by Japanese girls. Sneakers, knee-high white socks, a white female school uniform with a standing collar, and a short skirt that reached her knees. When Jiang Hai saw her clothes, even an experienced driver like him couldn't stand it. Needless to say, she must have taken Feng Yunqian and Ai Xiaoxi's clothes. But she liked to wear it, and the clothes were not revealing, so Jiang Hai couldn't say anything. He just let her put on the leggings, and then the four of them drove Jiang Hai's shield to Boston. Their target this time was Boston's Six Flags amusement park. Don't think that every city in the United States was a Disney. In fact, there were only 6 Disney parks in the world and only 2 in the United States. One Disneyland is in California, and one is in Orlando, which is Florida. Other than Disneyland, there is only one Disneyland in Japan, one Disneyland in Paris, and one Disneyland in Hong Kong and Shanghai. There are only 6 Disneyland in Japan. In the United States, there were more than 50 Disney parks just like Happy Valley and Wuxia. Although this amusement park was weaker than Disney, its strength was still very good. It claimed to have the best roller coaster in the world. The number of roller coasters in each park was quite large, and it was very popular among young people. Jiang Hai and the others wanted to go here this time. After driving for a while, Jiang Hai arrived outside the amusement park. But to be honest, at this time, outside the amusement park, it could be described as a sea of people. This also proved to Jiang Hai that whether it was the children in Wuxia or the United States, there was no child who didn't like festivals. Chapter 1052. When Jiang Hai and the rest arrived at the amusement park, Jiang Hai gritted his teeth. What? Because there are too many people. At this time, outside the amusement park, there are gongs, drums, firecrackers, red flags, and a sea of people. The Americans do not play with gongs, drums, or firecrackers. Naturally, there are no red flags. But there is a sea of people. Countless parents brought their children to the amusement park to play. And the most important thing was that the United States didn't have a family planning policy. Therefore, American families generally had at least 2 children or even 3 or 4. Moreover, Americans often divorced and often reorganized 2 families, so there were a lot of children. Regarding this, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Now, there were more children than adults in front of the entrance of the amusement park, and there were quite a lot of them. Are we still going to play? Looking at those people, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask awkwardly. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't like to join in the fun. When he went out to play, he would never do it during the New Year because it would be very crowded. Anyway, he does not have a job and he can go out to play whenever he wants. When he saw so many people, he does not want to get off the bus. But Daliana and the rest do not care about this. I have booked the tickets. Let's go. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marian waved her mobile phone. She had booked 4 adult tickets. For places like this, the tickets include the cost of all the entertainment facilities. This amusement park is not like the amusement park in Bing City, where they still need to buy a set of tickets. Either you bring us out to play or you bring us to get a room. You choose. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but roll his eyes. What was she thinking about at such a young age? Okay, I'll find a place to park. Raising his hand, Jiang Hai looked at the 3 guys full of desires and said helplessly. Then Jiang Hai walked around the area and finally found a parking space far away. After parking the car, he went to the amusement park with the 3 girls. At the ticket office at the entrance, Marian showed the text message and exchanged it for 4 tickets. Jiang Hai should have told them that mobile phones are not allowed to pay in most places in the US. It is the same here. But you can use your bank card to buy tickets online and exchange them later. The US is still acceptable. Look at France. In order to protect physical bookstores, French books are not allowed to be sold online. The price of books sold in bookstores is the same as the price of books sold online. In the US, Amazon and other bookstores are cheaper. Holding the tickets, a group of 4 people lined up in a long line and walked into the amusement park. When they came in from the outside, Jiang Hai didn't want to come in because he felt that there would be a lot of people. After entering, this feeling became even stronger. Throughout the amusement park, in front of all the facilities, there are a lot of people. Different genders and ages, the children's choices are also different. Some younger children are fond of the merry-go-round, while some more adventurous ones will go to various roller coasters, haunted houses, carts, and the like. Jiang Hai glanced at the amusement park here. It is similar to the amusement park in China. At most it looked a little grand. Every project had a theme, and some scenes would be arranged for performances. However, the timing of the events was quite tight. As soon as they arrived in the amusement park, the 3 girls were like wild horses out of control. They began to discuss what to play, how to play, and when to play. As for Jiang Hai, his opinion is not important. He is pulled here and there by the 3 girls. They kept queuing up and playing. Fortunately, Jiang Hai is strong now, so there is nothing to be afraid of. Watching the performances and playing with the entertainment facilities. To be honest, Jiang Hai has a very fulfilling day. But the pace is a bit too fast. Basically, after waiting in line for a roller coaster before he can relax, he is directly taken to another place to watch a performance. Before the performance is over, he is pulled to another place to play in a haunted house. At noon, they casually eat some hamburgers in the amusement park. After eating, they continue to play. He has to admit that these 3 girls are really energetic. They played until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. After watching the last performance, they gradually quieted down. I'm so tired, let's go back. Sitting on a bench in the park, Jiang Hai looked at the 3 girls in front of him who still want to play, and he couldn't help but say with some speechlessness. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 3 girls shook their heads at the same time. How can we go back? Didn't we say that we are going to watch a movie? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 3 girls said with a serious face, but then Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone and looked at it, looking at them with some embarrassment. Watching a movie is fine, but there doesn't seem to be anything to watch. Handing the mobile phone to the 3 girls in front of him, Jiang Hai said with some helplessness. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 3 girls also looked at it. To be honest, this year is a big year for Hollywood movies. There are many big productions such as Fast and Furious 8, Wolverine 3, King Kong, Skull Island, Justice League, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, Planet of the Apes 3, Avatar 2, Guardian of the Galaxy 2, Transformers 5, Pacific Rim 2, and so on. There are many good movies, but at this time, there are no movies. After a period of time, about 10 days or so, the summer vacation will be released. What's Stealing Daddy 2, Transformers 5, and so on will be released. And now, this time period is also the most awkward time. At present, in the cinema, Jiang Hai has only seen 3 movies: Terminator 6, Toy Story 4, and Star Wars 8. Terminator and Star Wars can be ignored, because he has only seen the first 3 Terminator movies, and he has never seen Star Wars. Toy Story. That is for the kids, okay? And the most important thing is, isn't it said that the series will end when the 3rd movie is released? Woody and the others have already been sent away, what is there to act? So, the current Jiang Hai is really not interested in watching movies. Let's go, let's watch this. Seeing that Jiang Hai doesn't seem to want to go, Daliana and Marian also sat on his left and right side, constantly shaking his arm, attracting the attention of many people next to them. In fact, today there are a lot of people looking at these three girls. After all, the three girls are beautiful. If it weren't for the fact that it was basically one family at a time today, even if Jiang Hai was here, there would probably be people coming to talk to them. Of course, even if someone came to talk to them, Jiang Hai doesn't care because those guys can't take them away. Lego Batman? What the hell is this? Taking the mobile phone from De Liana's hand, Jiang Hai looked at the page where he had already bought 4 tickets for the last row. Besides screaming, he couldn't do anything else. What the hell is this? What the hell is this? But since the tickets have been bought, Jiang Hai has nothing to say. After leaving the amusement park with the 3 girls, Jiang Hai first took them to eat. Maybe because of Jiang Hai's influence, these 3 girls also like to eat teppanyaki. This meal was naturally very enjoyable and it also cost Jiang Hai a lot of money, but for Jiang Hai it doesn't matter. After dinner it was already very dark when they came out. The 4 of them went to a nearby cinema. After changing their tickets they bought drinks and popcorn, then walked into the cinema. It turns out that even if today is Children's Day, there are still very few people who would take their children to see Lego Batman at night. In the whole cinema, there are more than 100 seats in total, but there are only a dozen people in total. Jiang Hai and the others also have to be counted. Because there are really not many people, they didn't sit according to their seats. There are people sitting on the east side and the west side, but they weren't close to each other. Jiang Hai and the others sat in the middle of the last row. As the music sounded, the movie also started, but in Jiang Hai's opinion, this movie is really childish. The dialogue is very childish and the animation is very childish. How many adults would like to watch a cartoon made of Lego bricks? Among all the superheroes, this is Batman with a darker style, and not many people would like to watch it. But soon, Jiang Hai knew that these people actually didn't come to watch the movie. There was a young couple in the row next to Jiang Hai. 5 minutes after the start of the movie, they were already entangled together. The woman sat on the man's body and the two kept kissing. Their hands were also testing each other's body. Jiang Hai felt that this thing may be much better than the cartoon, so he sat there and watched their progress. But unconsciously, 3 small hands also touched Jiang Hai's indescribable place. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai's hand was faster than them. With 3 slaps on their backs, the 3 little ones also pursed their lips and looked at Jiang Hai helplessly. You see, they are already like this. It's not good if we don't do this. Looking at Jiang Hai, Taraga came over and whispered. Not good, my ass. They are all couples. I am your father. Sit down for me. Watch carefully or go home. Jiang Hai glanced at her. For Jiang Hai, this is the bottom line and it is not so easy to break. Hearing Jiang Hai's resolute words, the 3 girls also sighed. It's so hard to meet such an unromantic guy. Chapter 1053. Why did you see those 3 little guys angry when you came back? What did you do to them? Lying on Jiang Hai's big bed, Feng Yunshan asked Jiang Hai doubtfully while swallowing something that can't be described. How is that possible? Those 3 little guys are a little tired. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai said with a little embarrassment. He can't say that the 3 little guys tempted him, but he didn't agree, so they were angry. That's too much. Really? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but come over with a smile and gently bite Jiang Hai's chest, then blinked and asked him. For Ai Xiaoxi, living here in Jiang Hai is really satisfying. She doesn't need to worry about work and money here. She enjoys life every day and is very indifferent every day. She likes this kind of life very much. As for vanity, it's a very simple thing. She can show off in her circle of friends that she is sunbathing, diving, playing on Jiang Hai's yacht, riding a horse, shopping, and looking at the likes that she has harvested. There is nothing uncomfortable about it. The only bad thing is that it is too far away from her home. But it doesn't matter. She can go back every year. Otherwise, after graduation she will go to Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou to work. She can't earn even a fraction of her current expenses in a year. She can only go home once or twice a year. Now she is here with Jiang Hai. Everything is wonderful. The only thing that she couldn't accept at first was that there were too many women around Jiang Hai, but now she has gradually let it go. It's okay if there are too many. She will treat them as roommates. Anyway, Jiang Hai is very strong in that aspect and there is no problem in being ignored. And Jiang Hai really likes her. This is the most important thing. Of course it's true. Hearing Ai Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He can't say anything, right? By the way, Jiang, the ginseng and pine seeds you brought back have sprouted. At this moment, Jiang Hai's favorite Aphrodite wisely diverted the topic so that Jiang Hai wouldn't feel so awkward. After hearing this news, Jiang Hai couldn't help but twitch his brows. This is good news. Hearing Aphrodite's words, Jiang Hai smiled and said, "This was indeed good news, but now wasn't the time to talk about these things." He hugged Aphrodite so that Jiang Hai could praise her. The next morning, Jiang Hai went to the place where he planted pine seeds and ginseng seeds. Pine seeds and ginseng seeds weren't easy to grow. In China, there was a special base to cultivate these things. It was troublesome for the average person to grow a lot of them, so very few people would directly buy seeds to plant. However, this problem didn't apply to Jiang Hai. On the second day after returning to Winthrop, Jiang Hai started to prepare to plant these two things. Those pine trees were all exposed to the sun. Only after the pine seeds were exposed to the sun could they be sown. However, they couldn't be directly thrown into the forest or grassland because the seeds didn't absorb enough nutrients and wouldn't germinate. Therefore, after they were exposed to the sun, they had to be planted in a greenhouse and wait for them to germinate before they could be transplanted. The same was true for ginseng seeds. They had to be grown like rice seedlings before they could be transplanted. Once again, it was proven that Jiang Hai's spiritual energy was very useful. The effect was very strong. Originally, he just wanted to give it a try, but he didn't expect that it would actually sprout. Looking at the small buds in front of him, Jiang Hai knew that it was time to transplant them. Although he might not take care of them very carefully, with Jiang Hai's spiritual energy, there naturally wouldn't be a problem. He took the small sprouts and shovels to plant the pine trees. He didn't plant them in the original forest, but in the open space in front of the door. Pine trees had pine needles all year round. In addition to producing pine seeds, they were also ornamental trees. Naturally, it was Jiang Hai's idea to plant them here. It could be used for ornamental purposes and also prevent others from seeing the situation in his house. Since Jiang Hai's manor became popular, there were more and more people around his house. Some of them were individuals who wanted to investigate Jiang Hai's secret. Some of them were major forces and officials who wanted to investigate Jiang Hai's secret. They all wanted to know why Jiang Hai's cows could grow to such an extent without any special care. Jiang Hai couldn't drive them away because these people didn't enter his territory. The road outside was public property. Jiang Hai had no right to drive these people away, but it didn't prevent him from planting some trees to block their view. Then he could also harvest some pine seeds every year, which was naturally an excellent thing. With a small shovel on his back, Jiang Hai dug a hole every 5 meters and threw the seeds that had sprouted into it. Then he watered some water mixed with his spiritual energy. After everything was done, Jiang Hai returned to his home. After taking the ginseng seeds again, he went to his forest. He didn't know whether it was because of the spiritual energy or because there were many terrifying creatures living here. When Jiang Hai first came to this manor, he often came to this forest to play. It was because this forest was very good at that time, especially in summer. When the weather was good, the sun would shine from the top of the trees to the ground. The spots were very special. Not only did Jiang Hai like it very much, but Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan also came here to take photos together. They liked this place very much. But he didn't know if it was because of Jiang Hai's spiritual energy, but now these trees were growing bigger and denser. Sequoias, oaks, red maples, these trees were growing bigger and bigger. In the past, they might only be a dozen meters tall, but now they were at least 20 meters tall. Moreover, they were quite luxuriant. The spots of sunlight in the past were very fairy tale-like, but now it was basically dark in the forest. You couldn't see any sunlight because the leaves had blocked it. However, during the day it was definitely brighter than at night. But if a stranger walked into this forest, it was inevitable that they would feel very scared. Don't forget, Jiang Hai still has 3 pets here: a mountain lion, a forest boa, and a crocodile. He didn't know what they looked like. Anyway, he came to plant ginseng today so he could take a look. The best way to plant ginseng was to plant it under a big tree. First, because it was hidden, there weren't many wild animals that would see it. Second, because the tree would block the sunlight. Ginseng wasn't a sun-loving plant, otherwise, its flowers would be valuable and not its roots. Jiang Hai's forest was naturally very suitable for the growth of ginseng. After injecting a little spiritual energy into these small ginseng seedlings, Jiang Hai also scattered them in this forest. After planting the ginseng, Jiang Hai also raised his head and walked into the forest. Along the way, Jiang Hai really found that this forest was really lively now. Although wild turkeys couldn't be said to be everywhere, there were still a lot of them. There were groups of wild birds, and the wild wyverns that Jiang Hai almost caught a while ago. Now there were a lot of them here. In addition to wyverns and wild turkeys, there were also a lot of pheasants, wild ducks, and so on. In addition to wild birds, there were also a lot of mammals and small mice running on the ground, but this kind of small mouse was not the kind in the house. This mouse was called a white-footed mouse. It was a very common mouse in North America, but it could only live in the fields and would not enter the human living environment. So in the countryside far away from the city, almost no one would deal with these white-footed mice. In addition to small animals such as mice and squirrels, there were also some coyotes, foxes and other carnivores, but these animals were all small and posed no threat to Jiang Hai's cattle and his men. Of course, in addition to this, there were also a lot of wild rabbits and the like. There were also some traces of wild boars, snakes and lizards. In short, although Jiang Hai didn't have any precious creatures here, the ecological structure and biological chain here were very complete. After walking into the forest for about 10 minutes, the grass in front of him slowly separated. The mountain lion that was a circle bigger than last year appeared in front of Jiang Hai. When it saw that it was Jiang Hai, it couldn't help but come over with a smile and rubbed its big head against Jiang Hai's leg. Jiang Hai also liked to rub the big cat's head. After playing with it for a while, Jiang Hai went to find the other two big guys with it. When he saw the big snake and the crocodile, to be honest, Jiang Hai regretted injecting aura into them because these two guys had grown quite big. They had obviously broken through the racial limit. If they were discovered by others, then Jiang Hai would be in trouble. But he was just thinking about it. Since he decided to take these two little guys in, he wouldn't regret it even if they had grown up now. However, Jiang Hai already had an atavistic North American lion. He didn't care if he had another titanoboa and kingfisher, right? After getting close to these three animals and explaining to them that they had to protect the ginseng seeds in the periphery, Jiang Hai also left the grove and returned to the sun. He had to admit that compared to the coldness of the grove, Jiang Hai still preferred to stay under the sun. The warmth of the sun on his body was really comfortable. Looking at his manor in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. This was the place he wanted to protect. Chapter 1054. June was a very boring but comfortable time. At least that was what Jiang Hai thought. He had 12 months in a year. Other than going home for the new year, he had something to do almost every month. In January he planted seaweed. In February he put out bait, which was the little octopus and squid. At the same time he had to start preparing for planting vegetables in February. In March he put out the fish seedlings, planted fruits, planted grapes and planted vegetables. In April he had to pick the tea leaves, perform the Poseidon ceremony and herd the cows. It was also the time for the annual beef show and wine competition. In May he had to participate in the wine competition. In August it was the best time to catch tuna. At the same time in late August the grapes were ripe and could be picked. In September the grapes were ripe and it was time to make wine. At the same time, from the end of September to the beginning of October, it was also the time to buy the New Year's cattle. In the second half of October, it was the last time before winter. He had to make preparations. After that, there would be a series of festivals. In November, December there would be winter festivals and then the new year would be over. Every year, Jiang Hai's most boring time was probably June and July. Because at this time, most people couldn't go to the sea because the water temperature was still a little cold. The real time to go to the sea was from the end of July to the beginning of August and the beginning of September, which was less than 2 months. Jiang Hai went to the sea himself to have a look. There was nothing fun to do. The cows were like that and so were the fish. There was really nothing to do in the manor. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't feel bored because he was used to living in the manor. There were so many girls playing with him every day. He could eat whatever he wanted and buy whatever he wanted. If he was bored he could go to the town for a walk. Under such circumstances, what was there to complain about? At least Jiang Hai felt pretty good. However, in this month when Jiang Hai was bored, there was a group of people who were very busy. This group of people was none other than Balian Mudun's people. Since the end of last month, after signing the agreement with Jiang Hai was very particular. There were no futures, no loans and no concept of going public. He was definitely not a qualified businessman because he wouldn't borrow money to lay eggs. He was so honest and straightforward. He would do whatever he said. Since he had signed the contract with Balian Mudun, when he came back, he directly sent the first red wine requested by Balian Mudun this year. Of course, Balian Mudun also had to transfer the cash to his card. It couldn't be done without any money. This was also why although Jiang Hai's things were good, they weren't particularly big. First, it was because Jiang Hai didn't want to make it big. Second, it was because of Jiang Hai's character. There would never be a situation where you would sell something first and talk about the price if it sold well. His things were like this. You got what you paid for. If you didn't buy it, he wouldn't sell it to you. It was said that harmony made wealth. It was really difficult for such a businessman to make a fortune. Of course, Jiang Hai was an exception. After the first batch of red wine was in place, Balian Mudun's operation began. Compared to Jiang Hai, he was an out-and-out operation master. He also had a lot of high-end sales. Almost as soon as Jiang Hai's first batch of red wine, 5,000 bottles, Balian Mudun had already decided where 3,000 of them would go. There was only one place: the Vatican. The Vatican. Speaking of this country within a country, probably everyone knew about it. Even if they hadn't been there, they had heard of it. This place was originally part of Italy. However, during the heyday of theocracy in the Middle Ages, it became a country. However, Italy had never recognized it. However, during World War II, in order to gain religious support, Mussolini recognized its legitimacy. Until now, this place was the legendary Papal States. It was the Holy Land of Catholicism, which 1/6 of the world's population believed in. The other Holy Land was Jerusalem, which was the Holy Land of Christianity and also the Holy Land of Judaism. Religious issues were not something that Jiang Hai needed to pay attention to. The people who lived in the Vatican were all from the Vatican. They were at least believers. All the world's religions had clear doctrines. Catholicism was the same. Originally, Catholics were not allowed to drink. Because there were many things about drinking in the Bible, Catholicism did not advocate getting drunk. Therefore, any drinks with alcohol content were actually forbidden. However, times were changing and people's translations were also changing. Since the Passover dinner, Jesus turned water into wine. Of course, this referred to the understanding and translation of modern people. Whether it really turned into wine or not, who knew? However, ever since this saying was approved, Catholics were allowed to drink red wine during celebrations. There were even some fanatical believers who would call red wine holy blood, although they didn't quite understand why they called it that. The Vatican was the Holy Land of Catholicism, where the Pope lived. Every year there would be a red wine purchasing event here. It could be said that as long as they selected a red wine, that red wine would become famous. To be selected, the only requirement was the quality. They required a large quantity, not just 1 or 2 bottles, but the quality was the same. All the wines had to be of the same quality. This was a problem for many wineries around the world. Balian Mudun had noticed this a long time ago, but he didn't have such a winery in his hands until he met Jiang Hai. This was also the reason why he always wanted to get this business. After the first batch of red wine was delivered, he directly sent it to the Vatican. The result made him quite excited. After half a month of selection, the Vatican signed a contract with him. Not only did he get a big order, but the words "Soaring Dragon Manor" also caused a huge response in the red wine industry. In fact, the Soaring Dragon Manor still had some influence in Europe, but its influence was more about beef and fish. They knew that the red wine of the Soaring Dragon Manor was good, but they really didn't know how good it was. Many people had tasted it, but the basic evaluation was that it was not bad. It was far from the honor it deserved. After all, most of the people here weren't professional sommeliers. Plus, the Soaring Dragon Manor belonged to the United States. They also had some regional problems. Therefore, it was difficult for Jiang Hai's red wine to open up sales and reputation in the European market. If the European market couldn't open up, let alone the United States. The people in the United States were basically from Europe. Their taste was actually more based on Europe, not the local taste. This was also the reason why Jiang Hai's red wine didn't become very popular after winning the gold medal last year. But it was different now. With the announcement from the Vatican, Jiang Hai's red wine could be said to have spread overnight to the ears of all the European executives, especially those who liked to drink red wine and those who liked to pursue these things, but didn't know much about it. They remembered that this red wine was available in the Walmart supermarket. So, a lot of people poured into the supermarket that night. But unfortunately, because of the contract signed by Jiang Hai, these red wines had been taken off the shelves. Not a single bottle could be found in the whole of Europe. Of course, some particularly rich people could fly to the United States to buy and drink, but after all, not all rich people had the time. In 3 days, the whole of Europe was looking for Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon Manor red wine, but not a single bottle could be found because all the wine was in the hands of Balian Leon Mudun. At this time, Balian Leon Mudun was almost done talking with some famous European wineries, distributors, and top entertainment clubs. So, in mid-June he released the first batch of red wine, only 500 bottles. If 500 bottles of red wine were placed in a supermarket, no matter how big the supermarket was, it would be difficult to sell them all. However, in the whole of Europe it was too little. There were even some entertainment clubs that only had 1 or 2 bottles. The red wine drunk by the Pope didn't even need to be advertised. It was bought almost before the wine was put on the shelves, but the price had already increased a lot. Jiang Hai originally sold a bottle of red wine for $800, but Balayan Leon Mudun bought it for $968. Naturally, he couldn't sell it at the original price, so he directly rounded it up. No, not $1,000. $1,000 would only make him a little money. He sold it for $1,200 a bottle. However, even if it was $1,200 a bottle, the wine was still in short supply. The first batch of people who bought it naturally had to show off in front of their friends. The hard strength of this wine was there. Except for the less well-known brands, even the pickiest wine tasters would find it difficult to say anything bad about it. In this way, the red wine of the Soaring Dragon Manor was almost an instant hit, just like the Apple IV in China. Westerners were naturally quite familiar with the concept of hunger marketing. There were only 2,000 bottles of red wine left, but it was difficult to meet the demand. After the second and third batches were released, there were only 500 bottles left in Balayan Leon Mudun's hands. At this time he was ready to enter the second batch, but this time he was going to visit Jianghai personally. He wanted to see how much the upper limit was provided by Jianghai, and it would be best if he could take some photos. However, after knowing that he was going to visit Jianghai, an old friend of his came looking for him. Chapter 1055. Logan International Airport, also known as General Edward Lawrence Logan International Airport, was located on the outskirts of Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. It was an airport with a high attendance rate. There was no other way. Jianghai lived here. In the past, when there were no planes except for when he wanted to go home, he would go to other places from this airport. When he returned to China, he would go to New York. This airport was the 18th busiest airport in the United States, and it was also the largest airport in New England. The so-called New England was the northeast corner of the United States. It used to be the territory of the British, so it was also called New England. This airport had a total of 4 terminals and 6 runways, but now one of the runways had been rented by Jianghai. Of course, the airport could also use it, but it could only be used when Jianghai was not using it. If Jianghai's plane wanted to take off, the airport's plane could not take off. They could only wait. Jianghai had a large number of planes taking off every day. Don't forget, the Tenglong Company also needed to use this airport. If this was in China, private planes could wait. But this was the United States. The rich were the masters. Jianghai was the master. He gave a lot of money to the airport every year. The airport would not make things difficult for Jianghai. If they annoyed Jianghai, it was not impossible for him to build an airport himself. At that time they would be in trouble. Today, Jianghai arrived outside Logan International Airport early in the morning. However, he wasn't here to take a flight. Instead, he was here to pick someone up. Balayan Mudun had already called last night, and he was coming over today. As a business partner, Jianghai naturally did not mind him coming to visit his manor. It did not matter if he entertained them while he was at it. So this morning he drove 2 cars over. It could not be helped. Westerners were really particular about this. No matter how good your off-road vehicle or armored car was, you could not drive it when you were picking someone up. The other party would be picky, so you had to drive a car. Jianghai had a lot of cars in his house. Needless to say, the 2 F-750s were in Jianghai's manor. There was an F-650, a Battle Shield, a Rolls-Royce, a Ford E-350, and 3 Terrace that looked like black technology in Jianghai. However, some people still couldn't accept the fact that Terrace was picking people up. Because it was an electric car, some people would even be picky about it. So under Prawalton's suggestion, Jianghai bought 2 more cars a while ago, Audi S8. To be honest, Jianghai had complained about the price of cars in Wuxia and the United States more than once. But every time he bought a car he would still complain. The difference was too big. Jianghai had also asked Chile about this car. It was priced at 1.98 million yuan in China. Of course, it was the best model. With Jianghai's wealth, it was impossible for him to buy a standard model or a medium model. But this car was only sold for $96,200 in the United States. Even if you multiplied it by 7, it was only 670,000 yuan. There was still a gap of more than 1 million yuan. It was really too expensive. Naturally, Balayan Mudun did not come alone. According to him, he came with 5 people. In addition to him, there was his bodyguard, a cameraman, a lawyer, and an old friend of his, Pierre Gagny, who Jianghai had promised to let come over to play. The 5 of them naturally could not sit in only one car. So Jianghai drove 2 cars, a Rolls-Royce and an Audi S8. The driver of the Rolls-Royce was Azalina, and the driver of the Audi S8 was Belle Lester. The co-driver of the car was Jianghai, and Knerson Peters was on the other side. After waiting for about 10 minutes in the parking lot, the sound of the plane landing could be heard. Then not long after, Balian Mudun and the other four walked out with their luggage. They saw Jiang Hai from afar. When they saw Jiang Hai, to be honest, they were stunned for a moment. Because such a situation was basically a formal occasion, it was inevitable to wear a suit. Even if it was hot, they had to wear a suit. But Jiang Hai wore it. It was very cool. He wore a very loose t-shirt, a pair of shorts with many pockets, and a pair of sneakers on his feet. Although they were all branded and not cheap, they really looked a little fake. But fortunately, the two of them knew Jiang Hai's character, so they did not say anything. They walked over with smiles on their faces and shook hands with Jiang Hai one by one. After shaking hands, Balian Mudun couldn't help but say helplessly, "Jiang, what you're wearing is really cool. Haha, you will get used to it in the future. I am used to being lazy, so if it is not a formal occasion, I will definitely not wear a suit." Hearing Balian Mudun's words, Jiang Hai also laughed. "I really admire your character. Where are we going now? Your manor? I can't wait." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pierre Garnier also laughed. For him, if Jiang Hai went to his restaurant dressed like this, he probably wouldn't be able to enter. But because he is Jiang Hai, he doesn't care about this. What he is interested in is still the ingredients. "No, I will take you to the place where you want to live first and then go to my place." After saying a few words to the two, the group also got in the car. Those attendants naturally went to the Audi S8 in the back. The interior space of this car was quite large. It was not very crowded with three big men sitting in the back. As for the Rolls-Royce, naturally Balian Mudun and Pierre Garnier sat in it. In fact, to be honest, Jiang Hai should sit in the back, but he is used to not caring about trifles. The co-pilot seat is generally for the bodyguards because it is the most dangerous position, but Jiang Hai directly opened the door and sat in it. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't care, the two guests here couldn't say anything and could only sit in it. As the car started the engine, they also rushed in the direction of Winthrop. When they came, Jiang Hai naturally had to provide a place to stay. Fortunately, he has a lot of places to stay. Of course, it is not in his home. What a joke, Jiang Hai is not going to let these guys live in his villa. There are so many girls in his villa, what will happen if there is an accident? Jiang Hai said that he has a lot of places to stay, mainly referring to his villas by the sea. When he built them, Jiang Hai mainly wanted to make money, but now it is a very good place to live. Living there will not be a drop in value at all. The car drove all the way, and when it passed by Jiang Hai's manor, Balian Mudun and Pierre Garnier both leaned on the window and looked over. Unfortunately, the car was moving too fast and they couldn't see anything clearly, but they had an intuitive idea that Jiang Hai's manor is really big. Especially when he saw the cattle in the distance, Pierre Garnier was extremely excited. You know, that is the best beef in the world. There is no need to describe it, it is the best. After passing by Jiang Hai's manor, the number of people gradually increased. Before they came, they heard that Winthrop is now a tourist city, but they didn't expect Winthrop's tourism to be so developed. After entering the town, almost everywhere was a group of tourists. About 80% of them were tourists from Wuxia, and the other 20% were tourists from Europe and the United States. As they walked and looked, the two couldn't help but feel a little emotional. This town is really beautiful. Blue sky, white clouds, clean and tidy streets, there is not a trace of pollution in the air, and large lawns and trees planted on the side of the road, the whole town exudes a refreshing feeling. After going to Argentina, Jiang Hai also felt that the colorful houses were very beautiful, so he also talked to Mayor Wallace, and many residents in the town will paint their houses in brighter colors, blue, yellow, pink, green. The colors of these houses will make them look more beautiful. The brighter colors will make people feel better involuntarily. Of course, it doesn't rule out that some people like those dim colors. Looking at this lively town, Balian Mudun and Pierre Garnier had a good first impression of it. However, the two had different thoughts. Pierre Garnier thought that this place is really beautiful and the people look very happy. On the other hand, Balian Mudun thought that Jiang Hai's power is really not small. Before coming, he could not investigate Jiang Hai. He knew that Winthrop is Jiang Hai's territory. Jiang Hai is like a local emperor here, and to be able to rule so well, it can be seen that Jiang Hai's power is really strong. It seems that this person is really worth cooperating with. Driving, Jiang Hai quickly sent them to the place they will be staying for the next few days, a sky blue villa with clouds painted on it. This villa is not small. The entire villa covers an area of 500 square meters, and it has its own parking space. It was originally prepared for families who came to travel. The first floor has a kitchen, bathroom, living room, study, and so on. The second floor has bedrooms, a total of 6 bedrooms with their own bathrooms. On the other side of the house is the beach and the sea. To be honest, Jiang Hai doesn't have to worry about a house like this at all, because as long as people come to visit, this house is the first choice. The daily rent for a small house is $150, and the big one is $200. For a house like this, $200 a day. Water, electricity, gas, and internet are all available. A dozen people can live in a squeeze. Why would you need a bicycle? Therefore, Jiang Hai's villa is almost always occupied. If you don't book it, you can't rent it, regardless of the off-season or the season. Chapter 1056. After taking these people to the villa, Jiang Hai went back. Because they were a little anxious, they came to visit in the afternoon. At noon, these people also walked around Winthrop and ate something casually. After filling their stomachs, Jiang Hai's car arrived to pick them up. At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they also arrived at Jiang Hai's manor. When they arrived, they saw that Jiang Hai and Knerson Peters had been waiting here for a long time. After the car parked in the parking lot planned by Jiang Hai, they found that there were a lot of things in Jiang Hai's manor. At a glance, there were many animals, Xiao Bai, Goldie, chirps flying overhead, big legs moving slowly in the distance, and so on. But when he saw Goldie and Xiao Bai, Balian Mudun's bodyguard couldn't help but tense up. Because he saw the evil spirit from these two animals. God knows what these two dogs have experienced, but if he had to face them without a gun in his hand, he would be a little scared. Hello, my people are preparing dinner. After the visit, have a good meal here. Not to mention other things, wine, beef, and seafood will be enough. Fortunately, Jiang Hai didn't give them too much opportunity to observe his place. Seeing that everyone got out of the car, he walked over with a smile and said to the people in front of him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, except for the bodyguard who was still on guard, the others smiled. These people knew how much Jiang Hai's red wine, Jiang Hai's beef, and Jiang Hai's fish were sold for. Tonight may be the most luxurious dinner in their lives. Pierre Gagny also smiled, he really wanted to see it. After everyone moved around for a while, Jiang Hai took them around the area. The first place to visit was naturally not the wine manor because it was the closest thing. While walking here, Jiang Hai also introduced his winery. My winery has been established for a long time. I invited Dulles Gerard, who is also a famous winemaker in France. He is now the person in charge. My grapes here, from planting to picking, are very strict. I only use very beautiful women. Looking at Balian Mudun and the others, Jiang Hai also opened his mouth and began to talk about the eggs. Naturally, who wouldn't say that their own things were good? Although it was a cooperative relationship, it didn't prevent Jiang Hai from talking about it first. But to be honest, Jiang Hai wasn't wrong, right? This winery was indeed established many years ago, during the time of the previous owner of the manor, but it had never been used. Jiang Hai also didn't say when his grapes were planted. Picking grapes and planting grapes were indeed beautiful women. Under the nourishment of Jiang Hai's aura and his own body, if they were to be graded on a scale of 100, they would be at least 80 out of 100. If they were to become an internet celebrity in China, they would be able to earn hundreds of thousands of yuan a month. They were beautiful, and smooth. In everyone's eyes, they were at the level of top beauties. But who knew that these beauties surrounded Jiang Hai all day long, unconditionally obeying Jiang Hai's orders? While listening to Jiang Hai's nonsense, these people also walked into the winery. As soon as they walked in, Balian Mudun couldn't help but smack his mouth. He originally thought that Jiang Hai was talking nonsense, but now it seemed that what he said was true. Grapes were perennial. The grapes from old vines would be big, round, and beautiful. However, although Jiang Hai's vines were only planted for 2 or 3 years, he had aura. So now his grapes were quite good and the output was quite high. In Balian Mudun's eyes, these were naturally old vines. Although he had some doubts as to why the wine here was so good and only began to appear in recent years, what Jiang Hai said was indeed true. And when he saw Aphrodite and the others working under the vines, he was even more shocked. Just now, when he heard Jiang Hai's nonsense, he didn't believe in the old vines, so naturally, he didn't believe in the beauties planting grapes. He thought that Jiang Hai was just looking for an excuse, but now that he saw Aphrodite and the others skillfully handling the grapes, he couldn't help but believe it. Oh my God, they are really beauties and there are so many of them. The cameraman behind him couldn't help but whisper after seeing Aphrodite and the others. Then the camera in his hand didn't stop. In his eyes, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Sheila, Asheria, Bridget, and Janice were like goddesses who walked down from a fairy tale, skillfully working in this green grape bush. Perhaps they felt the presence of the flash. These girls couldn't help but look over, then smiled sweetly at Jiang Hai and continued to work. For them, in addition to taking care of Jiang Hai, taking care of the grapes was their job. Looking at these girls, Balian Mudun's men were a little overwhelmed. You are really willing to spend money. With such beauty you can be a model outside. Planting grapes here, you are really extravagant. Looking at Aphrodite and the others in the distance, Balian Mudun couldn't help but pull Jiang Hai's sleeve and whisper, "Hey brother, relax, these are all my women." Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai said with a smile, What do you mean?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Balian Mudun said with a look of surprise, "It means literally they are all my women." Shrugging, Jiang Hai said with a smile, "It's really incredible brother, I'm already a little envious of you." Looking at the figures and faces of Aphrodite and the others, Balian Mudun couldn't help but sigh speechlessly. The world was unfair, not to mention now full of malice. After taking a look at the grape winery, Jiang Hai and the others went to other places. Of course, there was no need to take photos in other places, but the things that stimulated these people were still happening. Of course, this time it was not the beauties that stimulated them. There were no beauties in Jiang Hai's ranch and fishery, it was the money that stimulated them. Wuxia people pay attention to not showing their wealth. It is difficult to know how much money a person has. Of course, the exception is those who like to show off. Americans pay attention to showing their wealth, because this is also a standard to show your strength. Jiang Hai is now showing his financial resources. The richer you are, the more assured your partners will be. This is what Prawalton taught him. Next they went to see Jiang Hai's ranch. When the people here knew that there were nearly 50,000 cows in Jiang Hai's manor, each of which could be sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, they were quite uneasy. If it weren't for Knerson Peters here, they might have thought of a way to kidnap Jiang Hai. What a joke, 50,000 cows, even if each one is sold for $100,000, that's still 5 billion, 5 billion. What's more, Jiang Hai is selling more than 100,000, it's likely to be more than 150,000, that's more than $7 billion and that's USD. Thinking of this wealth, the smile on Balian Mudun's face became more and more relieved. This wealth alone is enough for him. Pierre Garnier's eyes were shining as he looked at the cows. A good chef is naturally very careful about the selection of ingredients. In his eyes, Jiang Hai's cows are all of the golden ratio. He has never seen such a large group of cows. Such good cows are really shocking. Jiang Hai took the shocked people to the dock. He took them to the fishing boat and took them to the sea for a spin. At the same time he introduced the fish in the sea. They may not have any concept of these fish, but Pierre Gagnier was still very shocked. This was because he had to grab these fish every week. Now that they had come to the place where they came from, it was really amazing. Unknowingly the sky gradually darkened. Jiang Hai also took them back to his villa. In the villa, Chia had already prepared dinner for tonight. When these people saw Aphrodite and the other beautiful girls serving the dishes, everyone present was envious of Jiang Hai. If you want money, you have money, you have power, you have power. If you want women, you have dozens of women who can be regarded as goddesses in their dreams. What's the meaning of life? Every day you just have to make money at home. It's simply a dream of a life in heaven. But unfortunately they were only thinking about it. After the dishes were served, Jiang Hai's women all left. Jiang Hai's women also have leaders, namely Qi Jie, Chia, Ai Xiaoxi, and Feng Yunqian. These four people are all from Huaxia. When the men are talking about things, the women naturally have to avoid them. It was also because they avoided them that these people could withdraw their gaze and put it on the dishes in front of them. In the end, when they saw the dishes, these people all sucked in a breath of cold air. The beef that they saw today after being cooked, was placed there piece by piece. The plates were stacked like a small mountain. There were lobsters that weighed dozens of pounds, deep-sea anchovies that were about a meter long, and all kinds of food. Looking at them, these people's mouths were watering. On the other hand, Pierre Garnier frowned. Although he could see that these ingredients were quite good, he didn't dare to disagree with this method. However, in accordance with the principle of guests following the host's preferences, he still didn't say anything and cut a piece of steak to eat. When the steak entered his mouth, his eyebrows raised. This taste is too good. Chapter 1057. For example, if you use applewood as fuel, you will add the aroma of applewood into the steak, and it's best to maintain the temperature at. If you use weather, maintain the temperature at. If you use carbon, maintain the temperature at. Don't use an oven because heating in all directions will quickly make the moisture in the steak disappear. Steak that is more than 80% done will not have any other texture except for dryness. Next, I will teach you how to make the sauce. Looking at Chia, who was standing beside him, wearing a white dress and constantly recording in a notebook, Pierre Garnier said while demonstrating on the iron plate in front of him, "Brother, I envy you so much. I have never dreamed of a life like yours, it's great, your place is simply heaven, a man's heaven." On the other side, on the balcony of the yacht, Balian Mudun was sunbathing while drinking red wine from Jiang Hai's manor, then looked at Jiang Hai beside him and said with envy, "Ah, there's no point in being envious." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shook his head and said with a smile, "He is telling the truth, there's no point in being envious. After all, he is the only one in the world who has the Dragon Ball. Top-grade red wine, top-grade food, top-grade wealth, and more than one top-grade beauty. When these things surround a man, to be honest, there are very few people who would not be envious of you." With a sigh, Balian Mudun continued, "This is the second day since they came to Winthrop. Last night, after Jiang Hai invited them to dinner, they went back to sleep. This morning they came again. It just so happened that Jiang Hai had just woken up. In order to show his skills, Pierre Garnier showed his skills to Jiang Hai. If he used ordinary ingredients, then he might not be as good as Chia. But now he is also using ingredients from Jiang Hai's place. After the food was made, Jiang Hai almost swallowed his tongue. It was too delicious. Chia naturally tasted it and was very surprised, so she whispered to Jiang Hai that she wanted to learn. Looking at her, Jiang Hai suggested that today's weather was good, so they could go out to sea to play. At the same time, he could ask Prawalton to add an extra portion of meat and seafood that it sent to Paris every time. This was specially prepared for Pierre Garnier. Of course, there was also a request. He wanted Pierre Garnier to teach Chia. Foreign chefs were not like Wuxia chefs, who were particular about family ties and treasured their own skills. As long as foreign chefs taught students, they would more or less teach more. Especially when he received benefits, he agreed directly. Balian Mudun left his 3 members of the inspection team and continued to look at the winery. Jiang Hai also asked Bell to accompany them, while Jiang Hai took Edouard Anderson, Chia, and Knerson Peters to board the boat with them. Edouard Anderson drove Jiang Hai's yacht and sped towards the depths of Jiang Hai's ocean. After boarding the boat, Chia had been studying how to cook with Pierre Garnier. After a while, Chia came out with a plate of steak and walked to Jiang Hai's side with a smile. "Come, have a taste." She cut the steak into small pieces, pierced a piece with a toothpick, and sent it to Jiang Hai's mouth to wait for his evaluation. After eating the steak, Jiang Hai felt it carefully and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and nod. "It's indeed better than before. The beef inside is cooked, but the water is stored inside. It's not dry at all and it's very chewy. It tastes good." Although Jiang Hai's cooking skills were average, his evaluation of food was good. After all, he had eaten so many delicious food, and it was not a problem for him to say that he was a foodie. The biggest difference between a foodie and a good-for-nothing was that one knew how to eat while the other could eat. A good-for-nothing only knew whether it was delicious or not, but he didn't know why it was delicious or not. Even if it was not delicious, he could still eat it. But a foodie generally found it difficult to eat something that was not delicious, and he would tell you why it was delicious. Right now, Jiang Hai was a professional foodie. Other than eating worms, he could tell what was good and what wasn't. The steak that Chia made now, to be honest, tasted better than the one she made in the past. Chia was very talented in cooking, but because of her illness in the past, she learned how to cook from television, the internet, and books. She didn't have a professional teacher to teach her, so she was still a little lacking. Miss Chi is the most talented young person I have ever seen. If I met such a young person in France, I would definitely invite her to practice in my restaurant for a period of time. But Miss Chi doesn't need it now. It's the best practice to be with Mr. Jiang. At this time, Pierre Garnier also came over with a smile and complimented Chia. He was currently in a good mood. Not only did he get to see the beautiful scenery, but the harvest this time was also very good. With Jiang Hai's special permission, he didn't have to queue up for their ingredients. This was a good thing for him. For this reason, he specially called the restaurant. In the future, as long as Jiang Hai called, he didn't have to wait in line at all, and he could make an appointment immediately. This was the good karma that Jiang Hai got. As for giving advice to Chia, it was just a casual advice. "Haha, then I took away your good student." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed, and then everyone on the boat laughed. Then they faced the rising sun and kept talking and laughing. Soon the sun rose very high. After a while, the speed of the speedboat gradually slowed down and began to cruise automatically. At this time, Edouard Anderson also came out of the cockpit. "Boss, let's rest in the living room. It's almost noon and the sun is too hot outside. We also need to prepare the ingredients for lunch." Hearing Edouard Anderson's words, Jiang Hai also took a look. Indeed, the noon sun was a bit too dazzling, so everyone returned to the cabin. Knerson Peters was responsible for the wine bottles and beer cans on the deck. After entering the cabin, Pierre began to study the existing ingredients. "Master, let me do it, you can guide me." Looking at Pierre's appearance, Chia also walked over and said to him with a smile. After Pierre nodded with a smile, he raised his head and looked at Jiang Hai in confusion. Jiang, why don't you prepare any seafood here? Looking at Jiang Hai, Pierre asked in confusion. Seafood? Aha, what kind of seafood do you want? I can get it for you in a minute. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed. Mr. Gainier, you are now at sea. My boss's fishing ground is not the best fishing ground in the world, but it will definitely not fall out of the top 3. There are countless precious sea ingredients here. What do you need? Just tell me. Everything in the sea is available here. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edouard Anderson also said with a smile. Wow, I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. Haha, when you talk about the sea, you naturally want to eat seafood, and the seafood in northwest France is the best. Hearing the words of Jiang Hai and Edouard Anderson, Pierre Gainier also laughed. He forgot that the seafood that can make Michelin restaurants in Paris every week comes from under his feet. Northwest. But hearing his words, Jiang Hai was a little puzzled and looked at him and asked. Although France is not as big as the United States or Wuxia, the people in each place are different and their eating habits are different. We divide France into 4 parts. Seeing Jiang Hai's puzzled gaze, Pierre Gainier also laughed. Many people knew about French cuisine and many people had eaten it. However, those who really understood French cuisine knew that French cuisine was also divided into different categories. Just like the 8 major cuisines in China, French cuisine was also divided according to the situation of different places. The southwest region is close to the inland, so it mainly eats meat and poultry. Honey-glazed duck, braised pork with soybeans, and the most representative of France, foie gras, are the representative delicacies here. The southeast region is rich in water resources such as near the Alps. There is also the existence of the sea, so they mainly eat river fish. The typical dishes are lobster sauce with white spotted pike, Marseille fish soup, Provence stew mixed vegetables, Jiang Hai's favorite cheese hot pot, crying roast lamb leg. The northeast region is the region of Burgundy and Alsace. It is rich in red wine, so everything is red wine. Red wine stewed chicken, red wine stewed beef, sausages with sauerkraut and egg pancakes are also the best there. And when it comes to the most representative French cuisine, it naturally has white snails there. Remember, if you want to eat authentic French foie gras, you have to go to the southwest of France. If you want to eat authentic white snails, you have to go to the northeast of France. And when it comes to the most representative French settlements, it is Paris and the northwest region. Most of the places here are near the sea, so it is also the place where French seafood dishes are concentrated. Saint Jacques scallops, mussels stewed in white wine, all kinds of oysters. This is a paradise for people who like to eat shellfish in the world. Of course, in addition to shellfish, steak tartare and crepes are also quite popular. Chapter 1058. Hearing Pierre's words, Edouard Anderson drove the boat and stopped on a reef. What? How to distinguish the reef? Just look at the sonar. There was sonar under the boat which could depict the situation below. It was easy to find some reefs and coral reefs. After finding the place, Edouard Anderson and Knerson Peters went into the sea together. Although the water temperature was still a little cold in early July, it was still within their acceptable range. After all, they were both men and they were not that delicate. Moreover, they were not allowed to soak in the water for too long. Holding a dagger, the two dived in with snorkeling equipment. 10 minutes later, Knerson Peters and Edouard Anderson came up, each carrying a bag of shellfish. There were all kinds of shellfish such as scallops, oysters, abalones, and all of them were wild. Jiang Hai did not cultivate these things, so these things were all wild. But to be honest, the shellfish he cultivated were almost the same as those in the wild. When the shellfish were brought up, Pierre Gagny couldn't wait to process them. As he processed them, he sighed with emotion. Jiang Hai's place was really a treasure. Even if the French ate these things compared with Jiang Hai's, it was still a lot worse. He could do nothing but sigh with emotion. Although Pierre Gagny was not young anymore, every chef was a head chef from the moment they were born. They all worked their way up step by step, from handyman to butcher, then to stir-fry, plate decorator, and finally to become a head chef. In Wuxia, being a special grade chef wasn't as easy as it seemed. You had to go through a series of examinations. After 3 years in the current position, you could take the examination for the next position. Therefore, even the youngest special grade chef had to be in his 30s. Western food, especially French food, was more particular about this, so naturally Pierre's cooking was quite good. After watching for a while, Chia also began to cook. She came here to be an apprentice, not to play. Chi, you're really talented. After dealing with the shellfish, Pierre taught Chia how to do these things. He had to admit that Chia might be smart, or it might be because of the Reiki. It was not wrong to say that Chia could draw inferences about other things from one example. Pierre only taught her once, but she had already done a good job. Seeing this, Pierre couldn't help but sigh. He had to admit that Chia was really talented. "You're the best teacher," Chia said politely when she heard Pierre Garnier's words. A delicious lunch was eaten on the sea. After lunch, everyone went back to their rooms to rest. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun was not so hot, so they came out, but they didn't sunbathe now. Balian Mudun and Pierre Garnier saw that Jiang Hai had a fishing rod here, so they were ready to try it. Jiang Hai just smiled. The fish in his fishing ground were quite tricky. Generally, they couldn't be caught without bait with Reiki. Even a veteran like Edouard Anderson had some difficulties fishing, let alone them. So Jiang Hai just sat next to them and studied French food with Chia. He let these two guys suffer. Sure enough, after fishing for an hour, the two of them didn't want to fish anymore. It wasn't that there were no fish. They could see that there were fish, and even some fish jumped out of the water from time to time in the distance as if they were mocking them. The bait they put on was often eaten up by some fish, but they just didn't take the bait. They were quite speechless about this. At the critical moment, they still have to rely on Jiang Hai. When the two of them had given up, Jiang Hai took the fishing rod from one of them, then put on a piece of beef he brought on the boat, and threw the bait into the distant sea. "Jiang, it's not that I want to discourage you, but the fish here can only be caught with a net." Looking at Jiang Hai's actions, Balian Mudun couldn't help but lean over and say to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai just smiled. "He doesn't know shit. Balian, I think brother Jiang should be able to catch it. After all, this is his territory. If these fish don't give him face, aren't you afraid that he will fish up the entire sea?" At this time, Pierre Garnier also came over with a smile and said to Balian Mudun. Of course, what he said was also a sarcastic remark. After hearing his words, Balian Mudun also laughed, but just when the two of them were laughing happily, Jiang Hai's fishing rod suddenly began to spin quickly. Seeing this situation, the two of them were stunned and instantly stopped talking. Jiang Hai directly picked up the fishing rod and tried it. It's a small fish, so there's no need to take it out. Jiang Hai directly spun the fishing wheel and began to reel in the line. Not long after, a red figure appeared in front of everyone. Oh, it's a real snapper. Seeing this figure, Pierre Garnier, an expert, had already recognized what it was and couldn't help but exclaim with some emotion. When Jiang Hai pulled the fish onto the boat, everyone saw that it was indeed a real snapper. True bream is also a type of bream. It belongs to the order Perciformes bream family. It is one of the more expensive bream. Jiang Hai does not breed this thing because it is not easy to raise, because it is not a gregarious fish. However, their number is not small. This fish won't grow very big. This fish is about 30 centimeters long and weighs more than 2 caddies. After being taken down, Pierre Garnier was very happy because this fish can be considered as dinner. At that time, he can show off his skills, and Chia was also very happy because she can learn more. However, this 2 caddies fish can't fill the boat, so Jiang Hai deliberately put a bigger bait the next time he baited it. This time he's going to catch a bigger fish. However, when throwing the bait, he threw it closer. Jiang Hai's bait is submerged, that is, the kind with lead. If the bait is thrown far away, it can wait, but if it is thrown close, it has to be pulled up immediately. However, with this pull, Jiang Hai felt that his hand sank. He knew that there is another fish, and this fish is not small. But no matter how big it is, Jiang Hai's monstrous strength is there. As long as it is a fish, he can pull it up unless it is hanging on the reef. As Jiang Hai gradually increased his strength, the fish under the water was slowly pulled up. Feeling it struggle, Jiang Hai knew that it is indeed a fish, and a big one. At this time, when Edouard Anderson saw Jiang Hai's bent fishing rod, he was stunned for a moment, and then immediately prepared. He knew that a fish that can make Jiang Hai's fishing rod bent must not be a good fish. When he was ready, the people who were originally surrounding the real snapper also noticed that something was wrong and gathered around. At this time, the guy who had been fighting with Jiang Hai for almost 10 minutes under the water slowed down a little. At this time, Jiang Hai also exerted his strength with his arms and directly lifted up. In an instant, a huge flat fish was pulled onto the boat by him. After getting on the boat, this huge fish was still constantly flapping its wings, but unfortunately this is not its territory. What a big flounder. Looking at this fish, Edouard Anderson couldn't help but smile. This fish seems to be more than 100 kilograms. No wonder it can last so long in Jiang Hai's hands. If they bring it back, every family will be able to eat it. As for Pierre Garnier, his eyes were shining. Flounders are flatfishes. In China, some people say that these two fish are different, but in fact they are the same. Flatfishes are also called butterfly fishes, and flounders are its other name. Of course, different species have different names such as three-eyed flatfishes, desert flounders, and so on. This kind of fish is a fish that lives on the bottom of the sea, and this kind of fish has a special characteristic. That is, if you don't care about it, it will grow very big at the bottom of the sea. Some people have even caught a fish of more than 200 kilograms. Of course, there may be bigger ones, but who knows? This kind of fish is basically very difficult to catch with a fishing net, unless it's a bottom fishing net. However, Jianghai has a lot of coral reefs and reefs, so it's impossible to use this kind of fishing net. Therefore, in Jianghai's manner, the number of these fish is definitely not small. Saltwater fish and river fish are different. Some people like to eat small fish because the meat is more tender. However, for saltwater fish, except for a few small species such as herring, most people still like to eat big fish. Especially Westerners, they don't know how to pick out fish bones, so they only eat big fish or fish steaks. Looking at the big fish in front of him, Pierre Garnier felt that he has a place to be useful again. After catching the fish, Edouard Anderson controlled the boat and began to return. Today, whether it's Balian Mudun, Pierre Garnier, or Jianghai and Chia, they all felt very good. They all had a harvest. In the evening, Pierre Garnier taught Chia how to cook today's dinner. Naturally, it was also very popular. After dinner, the two also left with their subordinates. Jianghai and the others tidied up and prepared to go to bed. However, before going to bed, a bath was necessary. After Delina, Marian, and Taraga all took a bath, Jianghai also entered the female bathroom. Recently, the number of times he took a bath in the male bathroom seemed to be decreasing. Chapter 1059. Who? A deep breath, accompanied by the sound of water splashing, Wallace Shelley stood up from the hot spring pool with her face full of water. Then she smiled and swam towards Jianghai. As for Jianghai, he leaned against the edge of the pool very indifferently. Aphrodite sat behind him, letting his head lean against her chest. Dana was pressing on Jianghai's left shoulder, Hilda was pressing on Jianghai's right shoulder, Paige was pressing on Jianghai's left hand, Sheila was pressing on Jianghai's right hand, Azalina and Galina Vasilea were holding Jianghai's waist, and at the same time licking Jianghai's waistline with their tongues. Ohelia was holding her left foot, Bridget was holding her right foot, and constantly using her tongue to play with Jianghai's toes. Jenny was lowering her head and sucking something that couldn't be described. Qi Jia was sitting in the distance with Feng Yunshan applying bath gel to each other. Ai Xiaoxi was sitting next to Qia, watching her record the dishes she learned today and some key points to pay attention to. She wasn't afraid that her notebook would be wet by the mist here. After Wallace Shelley swam over, she came to the other side of Jianghai's thing that couldn't be described. She took the initiative to take over Jenny's work, and Jenny moved down a little and began to attack the eggs. The cooperation between them was quite skillful. Will those guys still come tomorrow? At this time, Qi Jie, who was sitting in the distance, had already applied bath gel. She was washing in the distance while asking Jianghai. It can be seen that she was used to such a scene in front of her. Almost every night, such a scene would be staged here, but the location may be a little different, so Jianghai's nights have never been unfulfilling. If it was an ordinary man, he might have already informed his family to collect the corpse. He shouldn't come. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jianghai also opened his eyes and said to her with a smile, "It's best if they don't come. Those foreigners look at us lustfully every day. If it weren't for the fact that they are also guests, I would have already broken their eyes." Hearing Jianghai's words, Qi Jie said unhappily. Hearing her words, Jianghai smiled awkwardly. However, he couldn't refute her words. Indeed, those people's gazes were very wretched. There was nothing he could do about it. He was from France. What kind of place was France? Holy land of broken shoes. In that country, if a man and a woman met on the street, they could go straight to the hotel to play games without asking for each other's names. What else could you expect from them? Jianghai had already been to various countries in Europe. If one were to talk about the most open country, it would be the Netherlands. This was because the Netherlands was created by landfill. The entire country was very afraid. If one day the country was finished, what would they do if they died? Therefore, the whole country of the Netherlands was hedonistic, but no one knew why France was so open. But if you want to say that France was open, it didn't have sex capitals like Amsterdam and Manchester. But generally speaking, in France, as long as the husband and wife weren't together, there was a 70% chance that they would go out to fool around. Moreover, the laws of France especially protected women. For example, if two people got married and the man went out to fool around and was found by the woman, it was the man's responsibility and he would lose 70% of the family property. If the woman went out to fool around, it was also the man's responsibility and he would lose 50% of the family property. Therefore, in France, to be honest, young people rarely got married. They all went out to fool around. There were very few people who got married before 30. These girls around Jianghai had traveled all over the world. They were the highest level of existence. These guys could control themselves but they couldn't control their eyes. Jianghai couldn't do anything about this. Balian Mudun had already said it very seriously, but if they peeked, Jianghai couldn't possibly dig out their eyeballs, right? Fortunately, these guys wouldn't come tomorrow. Otherwise, Jianghai might really dig their eyes out one day. Okay, soak for a while more and he will be dehydrated. Tonight it's Feng Yunshin and Xiaoxi, right? The accompanying people are Hilda and Paige. Hurry up and take him back. After confirming that those people wouldn't come tomorrow, Qijia was also very happy. She glanced at the calendar hanging in the bathroom and said to everyone. After hearing her words, the other girls reluctantly let go of Jianghai's body. After drying Jianghai, the group also returned to the villa. After returning to the villa, Jianghai and the other four returned to Jianghai's room. There was no need to say what to do. It was a quiet night. If there was anything, it was not allowed to be written. Early the next morning, Jianghai got up because today was the day Balian Mudun and the others were going to leave. After all, they still had so many things to do in Europe. It was impossible to stay in Winthrop for too long. This time, Balian Mudun's purpose was to see Jianghai's wine manor. After confirming the production capacity, the rest didn't matter. Pierre Garnier originally came to take a look, but he didn't expect to solve the problem of his restaurant's raw materials. He was quite satisfied. He had achieved his goal this time by 1,000%. Now that they had gotten what they wanted, they didn't need to stay here for too long. So it was almost time to go back today. When they came, it was Jianghai who picked them up. When they went back, it was natural for Jianghai to send them back. A line of 2 cars sent the 5 of them to the Boston airport. After that, they got on the plane and returned. Jianghai also drove back to the manor. Originally, according to his idea, he would continue to stay at home after returning. There was no better life than this, at least he thought so. But unfortunately, God didn't seem to want him to continue to stay at home. Just as he was about to return to the manor, his phone rang. He picked it up and saw that the caller was none other than Prawalton. Jianghai contacts 2 people almost every day. One is Chi Li and the other is Prawalton. Even Selena Gomez only contacts him 2 or 3 times a week at most. He just called her yesterday. Why did she call so early today? Although he was a little confused, Jianghai still picked up the phone. Hey Prawalton, you're so early today. After picking up the phone, Jianghai said with a smile, and Azalina, who was acting as a driver beside him, chuckled after hearing his words, then turned her head and continued to drive. I dreamed of you last night, but when I got up in the morning I found that you were not there, so I called to ask where you went. When it comes to flirting, Prawalton should be the most powerful woman around Jianghai. Hearing Jianghai's words, Prawalton naturally followed up with the previous sentence, which made Jianghai ashamed. Ahem, where else can I be at home? Hearing what she said, Jianghai coughed softly, then said with some embarrassment. Hehe, I won't tease you anymore. I called you so early because I have something to tell you. Our family will have a family annual meeting the day after tomorrow. Our big supplier, are you interested in being my male companion? Hearing Jianghai's slightly embarrassed words, Prawalton said with a smile. Hearing what she said, Jianghai thought about it carefully. Isn't your annual meeting at Wuxia? After hearing her words, Jianghai asked with some doubts. Wuxia means the end of the year in Minnan dialect. In the Minnan area, the 2nd and the 16th of every month are the days when Minnan people worship the local god. It is called Ya. The 16th of December is the last Ya, so it is called Wuxia. Now it also means the end of the year. Later it spread to Huaxia. Generally, the annual meeting held by the company at the end of the year is called Wuxia. Of course, Jianghai just said it casually. Our annual meeting is not fixed. We can hold it whenever we want. However, after listening to Jianghai's words, Prawalton said with a smile. Hearing what she said, Jianghai had nothing else to say. This big group is really casual. You know, this is the world's largest retail giant. How can the annual meeting be so casual? Well, the day after tomorrow? Let's do it in New York. Hearing her words, Jianghai thought for a moment. Regardless of his identity as a supplier, or his relationship with Pra Walton, the other party held an annual meeting. He had to go and express his sincerity. Yes, I will go to New York tomorrow. You can get up and come over then. I will tell you the address. Hearing that Jiang Hai agreed, Prawalton also talked to Jiang Hai with a smile. Although the annual meeting is the day after tomorrow, it is impossible to go on the day of the annual meeting, right? Especially Prawalton, who is the host, naturally has to go in advance, and Jiang Hai also has to go in advance. Well, okay. Attending an annual meeting is only 2 or 3 days. It doesn't matter, just treat it as having fun. Have a good rest tonight. I'm not the only one who will go tomorrow. Hearing Jiang Hai agree, Prawalton also lowered her voice and whispered to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but think. Without thinking, he knew that Prawalton must have prepared a lot of programs for him, but looking at Azalina, who was smiling beside him, it seems that it will be difficult for him to recharge his energy tonight. This little girl used to be cold, but now it seems that she is getting closer and closer to the people in the family. It seems that she is very likely to tell them what Prawalton said just now. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's physical strength is here. If they wanted to fight, then they would fight. In terms of fighting, Jiang Hai had shamelessly said that everyone in his family was trash. Chapter 1060. Times Square Hilton Hotel. It should be here. Driving the car, Jiang Hai looked at the location on the GPS and whispered. At this time he was still wearing the outdoor short-sleeved shirt, but there was a suit in the back seat of the car. He also knew that he might not be allowed to enter tomorrow. The Walton family. Speaking of which, very few people knew about this family. First, it was because this family was quite low-key, and second, it was because this family really did not have any reputation. In the United States, in addition to the 4 major families of the United States, the Adams family, the Roosevelt family, the Kennedy family, and the Bush family, there were also 4 major families in the business world: the Rockefeller family, the Morgan family, the DuPont family, and the Mellon family. These 4 families represented the United States. In the United States, there were a total of 10 conglomerates, but only 4 of them were family-oriented. The rest were regional and business-oriented. The other 6 conglomerates were the First Citibank, which now represented the United States government, the Boston conglomerate, the Cleveland conglomerate, the Chicago conglomerate, the California conglomerate, and the Texas conglomerate. These 4 families, more or less, used to be the largest conglomerate in Europe, known as the foundation of all capitalism in the world, the Emperor of Capital, the Rothschild family. Speaking of the Rothschild family, it could be said that it was impossible for people who understood finance not to know that this family once ruled the whole world in the 19th century. At that time, this family's words were more effective than the British royal family, who was known as the sun never set. This was the reality. Someone once said that during those 20 years this family ruled the world, and in fact it was almost the same. However, on this road to world domination, it could be said that one wrong step led to many wrong steps. At that time, the Rothschild family did not pay attention to the rising United States. Instead, they paid more attention to the land of Europe. When the war broke out, the United States watched the fire from afar and sold weapons to become the world's largest country. The original tyrants of Europe gradually walked out of the stage of history. It was precisely because of the spread of war that the economy was naturally in a state of collapse, and the Rothschild family gradually withdrew from the list of world domination. The details could be found in a book called Currency Wars. Jiang Hai had never read it before. He had only found this information from the encyclopedia. The reason why he said this was mainly because of a piece of news a while ago. Apart from the hotel, the most famous Hilton hotel was a woman, Paris Hilton. A while ago, her sister got married to the Rothschild family. This family had once again appeared in front of the world. However, as the saying goes, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Although the Rothschild family was no longer the #1 family in the world, their influence in Europe was still quite strong. On the other hand, in the United States, there were still the 4 big families. However, in terms of wealth, to be honest, the Walton family wasn't any less than the 4 big families. The main thing that the Walton family lacked was influence. The Walton family did not have a bank, nor did they dabble in oil. Therefore he was naturally inferior to the 4 above. However, when it came to money, the Walton family should be the most powerful family. The Walton family owned 48% of Walmart's shares, which was worth $140 billion. Even if Bill Gates and Warren Buffett worked together, they wouldn't be a match for the Walton family. However, not many people knew about this because the Walton family was famous for being stingy. The chairman's office was 12 square meters, and it would feel a little cramped if there were only 5 people there. The CEO's office was specially requested to be expanded during Jim Walton's reign. It was 20 square meters, and this time 5 people could enter each side to discuss business. However, the money was still there. Therefore, every annual meeting they still had to maintain their image. At the same time, the Walton family's annual meeting was also famous for being irregular. Just like when Jiang Hai asked Pra Walton, it wasn't the end of the year and it wasn't a festival. Why did they have to hold an annual meeting? The answer was no reason. They could hold one whenever they wanted. Ever since the second generation of the Walton family left, the third generation of the Walton family was basically in a state of disobedience. This was especially true for Pra Walton's father and her uncle. Ever since Robertson Walton took over as chairman in 1992, 3 annual meetings would be held every year. It was also considered a family gathering. After driving to the hotel, naturally there were doormen and parking people who went to drive Jiang Hai's car into the underground parking lot. As for Jiang Hai, he walked into the Hilton Hotel with his suit. As soon as he walked in, a woman who was reading a magazine in the distance quickly stood up and walked to Jiang Hai's side. "Hey Jiang, you're finally here." Seeing this woman, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. This was because he also knew this person. Cheryl Lee was a woman who had more contact with Jiang Hai. She was from South Korea. When Jiang Hai went to South Korea, she also went with him. She was one of Pra Walton's women. Of course, she also had a deep relationship with Jiang Hai. "Phew, Cheryl, long time no see. When did you guys come?" Seeing her running over, Jiang Hai also hugged her. Originally, he wanted to let go, but Cheryl Lee directly wrapped her arms around Jiang Hai's waist and gave him a wet kiss. After about a minute, she let go. Jiang Hai couldn't help but let out a long sigh and asked her, "What happened?" "We left in the morning and had lunch here," Cheryl Lee said with a smile when she heard Jiang Hai's words. Looking at the time, it was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They had indeed waited for a while. Well, I left a little late. Let's go up." Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee took Jiang Hai's clothes with a smile and led him to the elevator. They took the elevator to the suite on the top floor. After swiping the door card, Cheryl Lee walked in with Jiang Hai. But as soon as they came in, Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim, because when these girls were waiting for him, they were obviously not idle. Pra Walton brought 5 people this time. In addition to Cheryl Lee, Colin Bavlovich, Barbara Martina, Fail Ferrio, and Isabel Lauren were all here. After lunch, as the old saying goes, when one is full and warm, one's desire will be aroused. They were full, the weather was so warm and they had nothing to do, so they naturally started in the room. At this time, Pra Walton was sitting on the sofa. Isabel Lauren and Fail Ferrio were attacking her breasts. Their hands were also attacking her indescribable place. Pra Walton's hands were also attacking. On the other side, Barbara and Colin Bavlovich were on the carpet, showing 2 opposite numbers. When they saw Jiang Hai coming, the eyes of these girls lit up instantly. "You're finally here. Hurry up and take off your clothes, our time is limited." Looking at Jiang Hai, Pra Walton couldn't help but smile and said. Cheryl Lee also began to help Jiang Hai get naked. "So, who should we start with?" Jiang Hai scratched his head and asked them. Okay. Everyone is fine, just hurry up." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girls couldn't help but expose their indescribable places to attract Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also gently patted and picked up Cheryl Lee. "Let's start with her." Along with some indescribable sounds, the battle in the room began. Just like what Pra Walton said, they didn't have much time. 2 hours later, a text message was sent to Pra Walton's mobile phone. Looking at the text message, Pra Walton, who was dealing with Jiang Hai, couldn't help but sigh and show it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also sped up because the text message said, "Dinner at 17:30. You can't be late." The sender was none other than Pra Walton's father, Robertson Walton. Although Pra Walton had a very important position in the Walton family because of Jiang Hai's existence, it was still not good to be late. The battle ended at 5:15. The two hurriedly took a shower, changed into formal clothes, and went to the prepared dinner restaurant. When Jiang Hai arrived, he found that there were not many people in the restaurant at this time. There were only about 20 people in total. These people were all members of the Walton family and important people in the company. As Pra Walton's male companion and one of the most important suppliers, Jiang Hai naturally had the right to come in. When the two walked into the restaurant, almost everyone's eyes were on them, but most of them were focused on Jiang Hai. For them, Pra Walton was often seen, but Jiang Hai was rarely seen. Speaking of which, Jiang Hai's personal wealth was probably the most among all the people in this room. However, he almost never appeared in any gatherings. No matter what the gathering was, whether it was for rich people to make friends, for charity, or for parties, Jiang Hai never attended. Now that they saw him, to be honest, they were a little surprised. However, Roberson Walton's serious face showed a trace of a smile. He didn't tell the others that Jiang Hai would come because he wanted to see their surprised expressions. Jiang Hai's existence was quite important. Chapter 1061. The importance of Jiang Hai's existence can be explained with money. 2 years ago, Walmart had just started working with Jiang Hai, but they had not officially launched. That year, their turnover was $482.13 billion. Of course, it was more than $480 billion, but the profit was very small. It was only about $16 billion, and the shareholders shared the money. This was also the reason why many people who thought they understood economics attacked Walmart. In China, there were many such voices. If the profit was low, the company would do everything possible to make profits and reduce costs. Many of Walmart's suppliers were Chinese companies, and Walmart was a big buyer. They had the right to negotiate prices, and they would definitely reduce the prices of Huaxia's suppliers. The profits of Huaxia companies would be low, and the company would be half dead. The workers would not get a raise and they would not have enough money to develop. All in all, Walmart's existence was a form of suppression for Huaxia companies. In this regard, Jiang Hai could only chuckle. He had nothing to say. These people were just ting. Why was the retail industry called retail? It was because the profits were low. If the supermarket's prices were not cheaper than outside, and the quality was better than outside, then why did people not go to the vegetable market but go to the supermarket to buy things? This was not logical. The supermarket was based on volume and naturally the profits were low. A spoon was sold for 5 renminbi outside, but it was sold for 20 renminbi in the supermarket. Would you buy it? Indeed, this was giving too much money to the company. In the past it might be 2 renminbi, but now it was 10 renminbi. But the problem was that this thing was only worth 2 renminbi, and it was sold for 5 renminbi. It was that simple. If you insist on raising the price of the iron used to make the spoon will increase. The price of iron will increase, and the price of all ironware and alloys will increase. Indeed, the people's income will increase, but the expenses will increase. This was called inflation. Everything would cost as much as it should, and this was what the country regulated every year. Just like Japan and South Korea, where you can't even afford a meal with 10,000 renminbi. What's the point of this? Although Walmart's profits were not high, they had one good point, and that was their high recovery rate. She had never heard of anyone having to write an IOU when they went to the supermarket to buy things, nor had she heard of anyone forcing them to pay for things on a monthly, yearly, or quarterly basis. Every time it sold a bottle of beverage, it would get the money back. So even though it didn't make a lot of money from this bottle of beverage, it did make a profit of 16 billion yuan into the wallets of its shareholders. As for the shareholders, they can do whatever they want with the money. They can spend it or invest it. There will be a sum of money every year. They don't have to worry about not receiving the money at all. They also don't have to worry about it falling. It's not like the shares of those high-tech companies. Although the shares are worth a lot of money, it has nothing to do with the company because it can't be touched easily. This was also why Walmart's shares were so valuable. However, even if the money was earned steadily, who would complain about having too much money? Before Jiang Hai joined them, Walmart's annual turnover was more than $48 billion, and its annual profit was $16 billion. Walmart had $160 million in cash. Of course, this was also subject to taxes. In the 2 years after Jiang Hai joined them, Walmart's annual turnover was as high as $520 billion. Of the $40 billion, $26 billion was supported by Jiang Hai's beef and seafood. The remaining $10 billion was from other things that people bought after buying things from Jiang Hai. After all, they couldn't just go to the supermarket to buy meat and fish. Of the $26 billion, $15 billion was from Jiang Hai's beef and seafood, $2 billion was from the Tinglong Company's logistics, and the remaining $9 billion was from Walmart's profits. Excluding the store rent and employee salaries, Walmart could make at least $7 billion a year from Jiang Hai's beef and seafood, not including the extra $10 billion. Walmart's annual profit was close to $30 billion, and 1% of that was $300 million per share. The entire Walmart family owned 48% of Walmart's shares. Jiang Hai brought the family $14.4 billion in annual income. Of course, after paying taxes, they would only have $8 billion left, but that was $8 billion. Jiang Hai only made $8 billion a year after paying taxes. Walmart's family could also make $8 billion by relying on Jiang Hai. How could they not treat Jiang Hai well? How could they neglect Jiang Hai? Now Jiang Hai was the god of wealth in their eyes. Prawalton was managing Sam's club thanks to Jiang Hai, and also got 5% of her family's shares. That was to say her annual income was $1.5 billion US. She knew that it was all from Jiang Hai. Not only did she have money but she also had the right to speak. For an ambitious woman like Prawalton, it was naturally the best. She liked women in addition to Jiang Hai, so it was impossible for her to marry Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai didn't have any burden on her. As for the other families, they were all lamenting that they didn't have a beautiful daughter. If they slept with Jiang Hai, maybe the Walton family would listen to them now. Jiang, welcome, welcome. When did you arrive? Seeing Jiang Hai and Prawalton coming in, Roberson Walton greeted them with a smile. Compared to the last time they met, he was much more enthusiastic this time. Looking at the old man in front of him, Jiang Hai also smiled and shook hands with him. After all, his relationship with Prawalton was there, so it wasn't appropriate for him to say anything. Roberson was also his elder. Seeing that Jiang Hai's attitude was right, Roberson Walton also smiled happily. He had to admit that Roberson Walton was really showy. His silver-white hair was neatly combed. Even in the room he wore a pair of brown sunglasses. His suit was also smooth. At first glance he gave a very fashionable and serious feeling. But when he faced Jiang Hai he was still very happy. This man could create wealth for him and his family. Naturally, wherever he went he would be the center of attention. I just arrived. Hearing Roberson Walton's words, Jiang Hai also said politely, "Tonight is a family dinner. All the people who come are our family members and our closest friends, so don't be shy." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Roberson Walton also patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. After a few more words of greeting, Roberson Walton, the family head, went to greet others. But before leaving he specifically told Prawalton that he must accompany Jiang Hai well. Even without his words, Prawalton would accompany Jiang Hai well. After he left, Prawalton took Jiang Hai to the cold table next to them. She knew that Jiang Hai didn't like to make friends in business. Instead of talking nonsense with those people he preferred to eat something. After walking here, Jiang Hai didn't hesitate and began to eat directly. Just now he consumed a lot of physical strength. It can be imagined that he will consume more at night, so he has to eat something quickly to make up for it. But he is the protagonist. Wherever he goes there will always be some people who don't like him, such as now. Hey, a country bumpkin is a country bumpkin. Eating like this on such an occasion, haven't you eaten anything good? Listening to the voice in his ear, Jiang Hai frowned and looked up at the source of the voice. In his eyes, a man in his 20s was standing in the distance, with several men about his age, looking at Jiang Hai with a teasing smile. "Shut up, Brett, believe it or not, I will tear your stinky mouth." Hearing this man's words, Prawalton looked at him with disdain, and then said indifferently, "What did you say? You wild girl." Hearing Prawalton's words, the guy named Brett also said, "Say I will tear your stinky mouth, trash Brett." Hearing his shout, Prawalton smiled disdainfully, and then said with a serious face. Hearing her say this, the guy named Brett couldn't help but take a step forward, and Jiang Hai naturally walked in front of Prawalton. If this guy dares to do it, then he won't mind teaching him how to behave. "Brett, what are you doing?" At this moment, a man in a suit came from a distance. This man looks to be in his 30s. He looks similar to the guy named Brett, but he is obviously much calmer. "Big brother, they." Seeing this man coming over, the man named Brett couldn't help but tremble, and then he wanted to say something in a low voice, but before he could speak, he was interrupted by this man. "Mr. Jiang is a distinguished guest of our family. You can't offend him. Now, immediately apologize to Mr. Jiang and then get out of here." Looking at Brett in front of him, the man said with an indifferent face, I'm sorry." Hearing this man's words, the guy named Brett reluctantly said sorry to Jiang Hai, and then went away with his group of friends to play in the distance. He can't afford to offend the people here, so he can hide. "Hello, my name is Cooper Walton. Nice to meet you, Mr. Jiang." After these people left, the man showed a smile on his face, and then stretched out his hand in a friendly manner. Jiang Hai also shook hands with him. Since he is called Prawalton, he should be a member of the Prawalton family, so is Brett just now. Chapter 1062. This is Cooper Walton, my third uncle's eldest son. He's also my cousin. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, Prawalton also introduced the person in front of him to Jiang Hai. Hearing Prawalton's introduction, Cooper also smiled. It's the first time I've seen Mr. Jiang. To be honest, I really hope to make friends with Mr. Jiang. Looking at Jiang Hai, Cooper Walton said indifferently. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled a little awkwardly and shook hands with him. I'm still very close to the Walton family. We're already friends, aren't we? Looking at Cooper Walton in front of him, Jiang Hai also smiled and said. Hearing Jiang Hai's slightly perfunctory words, Cooper Walton also smiled. After a few words of greeting, the person left. Jiang Hai and Prawalton also took a lot of food and went to a corner. While eating, Prawalton introduced the current situation of her family to Jiang Hai. The founder of the Walton family, Sam Walton, had a total of 4 children. Among them, the eldest was Roberson Walton, full name Samuel Roberson Walton. The second was John Walton, the third was Jim Walton, and they had a daughter, Alice Walton. Originally, the old man favored the second son, John Walton, the most, but unfortunately he died in an accident. Then came the struggle for the chairman between Roberson and Jim. John Walton's wife and children inherited his inheritance, but they were basically only in charge of distributing the money and didn't care much about the company. Alice Walton, Prawalton's aunt, was now divorced and had no children. She only lived in one word, play. With a net worth of more than $30 billion, she had nothing else to do except play. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was the female version of Jiang Hai. Now the second generation of the Walton family was basically quite old, about 60 years old. Now the Walton family was now like those melodramatic TV dramas, starting an internal power struggle. The main ones were Samuel Roberson Walton's family and Jim Walton's family. Samuel Roberson Walton had a total of 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. The eldest was called Jack Walton, the second was Prawalton, and the third was called Austin Walton. Now his wife could not be considered his wife, after all they were divorced. She was the mother of the third son, Austin Walton. Jim Walton had a total of 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. The eldest was Cooper. To be honest, he was also the most capable person in the third generation of the Walton family besides Prawalton. In the case of pure ability, even Prawalton was no match for him. The one called Brett was Jim Walton's youngest son. He also had a second brother, Hope Walton, and a third sister, Bertha Walton. Her second uncle's children had already left the ranks of the Walton family's competition after her second uncle's death. This was how cruel things were. Americans were a society where money was paramount. The losers were not like the people in China who had a bottom line. They didn't have a bottom line. Now Prawalton's second uncle's family could still live very well. It was entirely because they only wanted money, and they didn't want to be in power. In a situation where they didn't want power, they were the main targets that everyone fought for. Therefore, no one would go against them because if they were pushed to the other side, they would be the ones suffering. These people were very smart and they wouldn't do such a thing. In Cooper's eyes, Jiang Hai was such a person. He blamed him for coming over just to make a good impression. If there was a chance in the future, he naturally hoped that Jiang Hai would support him, but Jiang Hai's words were very clear. He had a close relationship with Prawalton, so they were friends. In other words, if Prawalton didn't let him be friends with them, then they wouldn't be friends. It was precisely because Jiang Hai's words were very tough that Cooper just smiled and left. He was different from Brett. As mentioned before, he was one of the best people in the third generation. He naturally knew about the cooperation between Jiang Hai and Walmart. In fact, Walmart had the right to negotiate, but in fact, it didn't matter if Walmart begged Jiang Hai to cooperate. Jiang Hai's beef was no longer unknown in the early days. Now, if he opened a specialty store in every city, he could make a lot of money. He could completely skip the Walmart group. The reason why Jiang Hai didn't do so was in his opinion. First, it was for stability. Second, it was to give face to Prawalton. After all, the relationship between the two was there. Of course, if Jiang Hai knew what he was thinking, Jiang Hai would be very surprised and ask, "Can it be done like this?" Don't say that Jiang Hai was an idiot. He really didn't think that way. His mind wasn't completely focused on making money. For Jiang Hai, although money was very important, enjoying life was actually the most important thing. In order to open a store, he was afraid that he could make more than $1 billion a year or even billions of dollars. He didn't want to do it because it would be very troublesome. Just the initial market expansion and construction were enough to make him feel physically and mentally exhausted. He liked to enjoy life and had no ambition. Moreover, he was cooperating with Walmart. As long as Walmart wanted to make money, it had to have a good relationship with Jiang Hai. The largest company in the United States was not a joke. It was completely no problem to keep Jiang Hai. The premise was that Jiang Hai, like John's son, just wanted to make money and didn't care about anything else. "Brett, I heard that you were bullied by someone?" Just as Jiang Hai and Prawalton were eating, a guy with slicked back hair came over from a distance. This guy looked like a replica of Roberson Walton, but was dozens of years younger. Everyone present should know this person except Jiang Hai. Austin Walton, the youngest son of Samuel Roberson Walton, was also the son who looked the most like him. However, his life had been quite difficult recently. Don't forget that Prawalton had a grudge against him. When Prawalton was young, he was often bullied by this family. He even began to fear that men liked women because of this family. Later, after she showed her ability, she made Austin Walton's uncle, who had bullied her, disappear. Since then, her relationship with this family had fallen to a freezing point. Roberson Walton didn't want his family to fight among themselves, so he separated. In fact, in his view, Prawalton, the illegitimate daughter, was not as important as his youngest son, so he had been protecting this family. However, the relationship between Prawalton and Jiang Hai was good, and after they made it clear in order to win Prawalton over, he had to watch Prawalton suppress her brother. Recently, Austin Walton's life had been quite difficult. He hadn't had a good time in the past 2 years. He opened the company under the protection of Feng Walton, and lost tens of millions in the past 2 years. Although Roberson Walton was rich, that was his money. He wouldn't be willing to give it directly to his son. What's more, Prawalton and her elder brother Jack Walton would also raise objections. They weren't born from the same mother, so how could they be brothers? Therefore, even if he was willing to give money, he would not be happy about it. Moreover, he was constantly losing money. Last year, he directly asked Austin Walton to file for bankruptcy. What was the use of having a company that was constantly losing money? After the bankruptcy, the only money Austin Walton could spend was his pocket money, which was very little for him. This guy's character was somewhat similar to Qi Li's. He was dissatisfied and angry every day, and he was more flamboyant than Qi Zhengtao. However, Prawalton was much more ruthless than Qi Li. Although she wouldn't kill Austin Walton, it was inevitable that she wouldn't let him have a peaceful day. After the company went bankrupt, he was in a bad mood, so he went to a bar to drink, and then he was beaten up. The murderer couldn't be found, so he went out for a drag race, was arrested by the police, had a party at home, smoked something illegal, and was investigated by the FBI. It could be said that during this period of time, the detention center was his second home. The time he spent there was longer than the time he spent at home. After entering the detention center, no one gave him, the son of the Walton family, any face. They beat him and scolded him when they needed to. Roberson Walton was not stupid. After the first 2 times, he knew that someone was targeting him. At first, he thought it was Jim Walton's family. However, after investigating and finding out that it was Prawalton, he kept quiet. This was because he couldn't afford to offend this daughter of his. After getting Austin Walton out of the detention center again, he directly locked his son in the house and absolutely didn't allow him to take a step out of the villa. It was almost like he was in confinement. He wasn't allowed to drink, party, or contact his bad friends. If it wasn't for the family's annual meeting today, he probably wouldn't have been able to show his face. Therefore, it was impossible to say that he didn't hate Prawalton. However, the biggest problem now was that he couldn't win against Prawalton. Even if Prawalton broke his leg now, he had no one to reason with. Samuel Roberson Walton was a businessman, a real businessman. Although he liked Austin Walton, his shares would definitely be divided into 3 after his death. All 3 of his children would have shares, and even Prawalton would have more because he had shown his value. It was precisely because of this that Austin Walton found Brett. Chapter 1063. It's you. How come you have the leisure to come and find me? Looking at Austin Walton, Brett Walton said with some disdain. Roberson Walton's family and Jim Walton's family were basically the same. There were elites and trash. The original elite of the Roberson Walton family was Jack Walton. Now he was in charge of all the Walmart supermarkets in the southwest of the United States. He was very strong and low-key, perfectly inheriting Sam Walton's character. He was also the most promising person to take over the Walton family. Now the limelight was faintly overshadowed by Prawalton, but the relationship between the two was more of a cooperative relationship. Prawalton also indicated that she would not join the board of directors, so she and Jack Walton were half allies. The trash was this Austin Walton, but there was no other way. The youngest son and the eldest grandson were the lifeblood of the old man and the old woman. This sentence was also somewhat popular in the United States. In the Jim Walton family, the elite was naturally the outstanding Cooper Walton among the 3 generations. He managed the Walton family's business in the southeast and central areas. In fact, in terms of strength, he might be stronger than Jack. The second son, Hope, was in politics. He was now a state senator. If he could sneak into the House of Representatives in the future, his influence would be great. The third son, Brett, was a trash similar to Austin. The fourth son, Bertha Walton, was a rich young lady. It was not wrong to call her trash. As for trash, most of them were the same. They were arrogant but incompetent. They thought that they were invincible, but they were just unlucky. If others could do it, so could they. They did not care about the reality at all. They only thought that if they wanted to, then so be it. Therefore the two trash, Austin and Brett, called each other trash and extremely looked down on each other's existence. Now that Austin had taken the initiative to come and find him, this made Brett a little confused, but the disdain on his face was still very strong. "Nothing, I just heard that you had a hard time, so I came to see." Austin's expression darkened when he heard Brett's words, but he still suppressed his anger and spoke to Brett with a fake smile. "Humph, that's because I don't want outsiders to see us as a joke." Hearing what Austin said, Brett was also taken aback and then said stiffly. Hearing his words, Austin couldn't help but laugh. Who can afford to provoke Walton now? "Alright, stop pretending. I still don't know what's going on with you. Have you ever thought about revenge?" Austin came over and said seriously when he heard Brett's words. Brett's expression changed when he heard Austin's words. He looked at Austin in horror. "Austin, if you want to die, don't drag me down. If they lose a single strand of hair, your father and my father will beat us to death." Looking at Austin in front of him, Brett said with a serious face. Although they were useless, they knew that Jiang Hai was their family's most important business partner. If they didn't have one, they could more or less find a substitute manufacturer for other things. But Jiang Hai's fish and beef were the only things that Scorpion Daddy had. He was the only one in the world who had them. Under such circumstances, if they dared to provoke Jiang Hai, they would really be cut into pieces by their father. After all, no one would go against money, especially in a place like the United States. The concept of money being supreme had long been deeply rooted in the hearts of Americans. In China, there might be people who didn't want money for family, love, friendship, and so on. But in the United States, such a situation was very rare. Everything could be measured by money. If they dared to provoke Jiang Hai, their two fathers, even if they didn't sever their relationship with them, would definitely give them a fierce beating. They might even hand them over to curry favor with Jiang Hai. This was the biggest difference between Wuxia and the United States. I'm not crazy. Why would I provoke him? What I mean is, you see how arrogant that guy is. I'm thinking, can we make him lose face? Looking at Brett in front of him, Austin smiled. Although he was useless, he wasn't stupid. He knew that at the moment he was far less important than Jiang Hai. So under such circumstances he wouldn't provoke Jiang Hai. But not looking for trouble with him, just a show of strength, was probably something that their fathers would still be very willing to see. Make him lose face? Hearing Austin's words, Brett's eyes couldn't help but light up. If they were stupid, they could give it a try. It's a formal cocktail party tomorrow. Some of my friends will come, so we can. Austin began to whisper when he saw that Brett was tempted. But at this time Jiang Hai didn't know about this. He only knew that the food cooked by the chef here was still very good. Although the materials were not as good as his own manner, the craftsmanship was good. Even if Chia learned a lot from Pierre Garnier, the experience of craftsmanship couldn't be learned in a day, so he still ate very happily. The meal was quickly finished. After eating, just as the other people wanted to get to know Jiang Hai and Walton had already left. With Jiang Hai's identity, no one had the qualifications to ask him to do anything. He also didn't come here to ask for cooperation. Only others would beg him, not him. Naturally, after eating, he directly left and no one dared to stop him. As for what to do after returning to Walton's room, this topic ended here. Because of the relevant regulations of the country, some things couldn't be described. Jiang Hai often did these things, but they couldn't be described, so there was no other way. But after going back, because it was still early, it seemed that there was still time to sleep tonight. "Boss, why don't you ask him about the sales rights of his red wine in Europe and the Middle East?" Looking at Jiang Hai and Walton leaving, a man in the distance walked in front of Roberto Walton and whispered. If Jiang Hai was here, he would definitely recognize that this man was none other than the executive CEO of the Walmart Group, Dong Mingluan. He was the one who wanted to marry Walton, but since Jiang Hai made a scene at the engagement ceremony, he knew that he and Walton were finished, and his original position had begun to be shaken. In the past, in the company, he was the third person who had a say in the company besides Roberto Walton and Jim Walton. When the two were not around, he represented the company. He could help the company make money so the shareholders would listen to him. But now, Walton could make more money, and she was a member of the Walton family, and she had Jiang Hai's support behind her. So, her existence was more important than his. After all, he could be replaced, and Walton could not be replaced by others, even if it was because of Jiang Hai. It was precisely because he understood this that his role changed instantly. The original third person instantly became a professional CEO. It was not easy to become the CEO of the Walmart Group, at least he had enough wisdom. Under the situation of managing the company well, he was also very close to Roberto Walton. This time, although it was Roberto Walton's idea to call Jiang Hai, he also gave a suggestion. He wanted to ask why Jiang Hai gave the red wine sales rights to Balian Mudun, because they were partners. But after hearing his words, Samuel Roberto Walton chuckled. He naturally knew why Jiang Hai gave the sales rights to the Europeans. Although he was not familiar with Jiang Hai, Walton also told him about it. There was only one reason why Jiang Hai sold the sales rights to Balian Mudun, and that was, they did not make money. Walmart does not have the ability to market this wine. It was different from beef and fish, which had a price tag. Red wine depended on its reputation and other people's tastes. Walmart does not know how to market this wine. But Balian Mudun was an expert in this field. What's more, according to Walton, how many Walmarts were there in the United States? How many in Europe and the Middle East? How much was the selling price? If Balian Mudun really sold his red wine at $2,000 a bottle like Jiang Hai imagined, then the Walton family would make more money than before. And most importantly, Jiang Hai's character was destined to not be blamed or unhappy. If he was unhappy, he would endure it. If he could not endure it, then he would not cooperate. It was precisely because he understood this point. So Roberto Walton only invited Jiang Hai over and did not mention a word about the red wine. If they mentioned the red wine and made Jiang Hai unhappy, then he would not sell the beef and fish to them. Then they would be in trouble. They absolutely could not lose the big picture for the small. This was also a consensus among them. It was precisely because of this that when Jiang Hai came today, Roberto Walton did not ask. Even Jim Walton, who was far away, did not come over to greet Jiang Hai. He just raised his glass from afar. But what they did not know was that their two prodigal sons were now preparing to show Jiang Hai who was in charge. The night was silent. When Jiang Hai got out of bed to have lunch the next day, the people invited by the Walton family also came one after another. Although the time of the banquet was at night, no one would come on time. Chapter 1064. The Walton family's banquet was quite prestigious among the top families in the United States. Although the Walton family would gather 3 times a year, which made the top families speechless, it was inevitable for them to send someone to attend the banquet. The Walton family was famous for being low-key. It didn't matter if those big shots came or not, they could just send a message. They didn't care too much about their reputation. But even so, the Walton family's banquet was a party that everyone in the United States, even the entire Western world, wanted to attend. But as mentioned earlier, the Walton family was very low-key, so unless it was a guest invited by the family members, other people couldn't get in. Americans, or to be exact, Westerners, liked gatherings very much because it was a way to bond. In addition to sucking up to the Walton family, this kind of gathering was also a chance for them to get to know each other and look for partners. Even some celebrities, whether they were from the entertainment industry or the stylistic world, would find a chance to come. After all, there weren't many opportunities to build a relationship with such a rich family. Since they were here to make friends, it was impossible for them to come at the right time. If they only came to attend the banquet for 1 or 2 hours and then left, they wouldn't be able to meet anyone. Therefore, many people would come very early. Generally speaking, the lower the status, the more people wanted to know more people, so they would come early. Of course, they wouldn't come early in the morning, but after lunch, people would come one after another at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It wasn't the first time the Walton family held such a banquet, so they were naturally prepared. In addition to the main banquet hall, there were also several banquet halls with dried fruits, cold dishes, and so on, just to give these people a place to stay. Just like the birthday celebrations of the elderly in China, since it was a banquet, naturally someone needed to be there to greet them. And the person who was there to greet them was the 3rd generation of the Walton family. Originally, except for Hope, everyone else had to go. After all, Hope was a councilman. He wanted to be an official, so he wouldn't entertain others. He didn't even come today to avoid arousing suspicion. One must know that in the United States, corruption was a serious crime that could lead to imprisonment. Therefore, people in politics couldn't let others have any evidence against them. Even when they wanted to donate money to politics, they had to do it secretly. Who would dare to come in public? Not to mention in such an occasion. Under such circumstances, basically every year, the person who came to greet these guests was Jim Walton's eldest son, Cooper Walton, with a group of younger brothers and sisters. In the past, P.R.A. Walton naturally had to go, but since last year she didn't have to go anymore. Who told her to be so powerful? In such a family, whoever made more money was the most powerful. However, she couldn't go just in time. She still had to go earlier. So after lunch, P.R.A. Walton and Jiang Hai stayed in the room for a few hours. At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she changed into an evening dress and went downstairs with Jiang Hai, who was wearing a suit, to one of the rooms. Although she didn't have to entertain, she still had to show her face. You can wait here for a while. After I meet these people, I will come back to you. After coming to the room, Pra Walton looked at Jiang Hai and said with a smile. Jiang Hai also knew that although the social activities of Americans in Wuxia were different, she, as the host, had to ask if the food was good and if there was anything else they needed. This was inevitable regardless of whether it was Wuxia or the United States, so Jiang Hai just nodded and didn't say anything. Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, Pra Walton also walked to some people she knew in the room. These people were invited by the Walton family, so basically, everyone went to take care of the guests of each family. If you didn't know this person, you didn't need to go up and say anything. Even if you weren't familiar with them, it didn't matter. Looking at Pra Walton entering the crowd like a butterfly, Jiang Hai also found a place to sit down. Although he ate a lot at noon, he consumed a lot, so now as soon as he sat down he began to eat again. Just as he was eating happily, a few people came over and unconsciously walked in front of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai looked up and found that he knew the people who came. The guy who was scolded yesterday for being a bumpkin seemed to be called Blair or something. He didn't remember. The other two people looked familiar, but he didn't know them. Looking at the eyes of these people, Jiang Hai frowned and threw a biscuit into his mouth. What's the matter? While chewing the biscuit in his mouth, Jiang Hai looked at the people in front of him and said. His attitude was naturally not very good. Oh, it's nothing. I just came to see you because I don't think I've seen you in person before. Brett said he had seen you before, so I asked him to bring me here. These are all my friends. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, a man he didn't know at this time said with a smile. Looking at him, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows. What did this guy say? Why am I so uncomfortable? What does he mean by come to see me? Am I some kind of animal? But he couldn't find anything to nitpick. Now you've seen me? I'm going to continue eating. Is there a problem? Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai shook his head and didn't want to talk to him anymore. He lowered his head and continued to eat the cake in front of him. But these people didn't come to see Jiang Hai eat the cake. Seeing that Jiang Hai was going to ignore them, the man leaned forward, put his hand on the table where Jiang Hai was eating, and looked at him condescendingly. My name is Austin Walton and Pulla is my sister. I heard that Mr. Jiang is good at sports. Are you interested in exercising before the banquet? Even if it's for eating more later, it's also good. Looking at Jiang Hai, the man said with a fake smile. Hearing his words, his bad friends around him all laughed. Originally, these guys were not good people. Naturally, now that they had a chance to ridicule Jiang Hai, they wouldn't let it go. Of course, these people only dared to laugh. With Jiang Hai's current strength, they couldn't afford to offend him. As the second generation, it was okay to bully others, but you had to know that you couldn't afford to offend the person you bullied. A person who could come to the Walton banquet and had a close relationship with Pra Walton. To be honest, as long as these people weren't stupid, they only dared to laugh. Sorry. The laughter here soon attracted the attention of all the people present. At this time, Pra Walton also saw the situation over there. When she saw that Jiang Hai was surrounded by those people, she couldn't help but stare. Then she apologized to the person who was talking and directly walked over. Without saying anything, she came to Jiang Hai's side and glared at these people. Are you looking for death? How dare you provoke him? Don't you know who he is? With her hand on Jiang Hai's shoulder, Pra Walton directly said coldly without saying anything. Hearing her words, people here were more or less a little scared. How could people in this circle not know the existence of Pra Walton? This female devil was not as easy to get along with as one imagined. Although she was beautiful, she was a poisonous rose. If you dared to provoke her, it wouldn't be as simple as a root thorn, it would be fatal. In an instant, these people were a little scared. Ahem, Sister Pra Walton, you don't have to be so nervous. We don't have any bad intentions. We just want to ask Jiang Hai if he's good at sports. If he's good at sports, we'll go out and play. If not, forget it. We're also trying to build a good relationship. Hearing Pra Walton's words, Brett flashed, and Austin also smiled awkwardly and whispered. It doesn't matter. I'm good at sports. What do you want to play? You can tell me. Patting Prawalton's hand, Jiang Hai didn't know what these people wanted to do, but he could play with them. Anyway, he was a little bored. I heard that you played basketball and you're very good at it. Let's play tennis today. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Austin's eyes lit up, and then he said with a smile. Yes, he had already checked Jiang Hai and knew that Jiang Hai was very good at basketball. He even went to the NBA for a trial. If it wasn't because he was really too rich, maybe he would have debuted in the NBA, so playing basketball with him was definitely impossible. Among his good friends there was an expert tennis player. Today he had specially invited him over. Tennis? Play with you? Okay, let's go. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. He had played tennis before, but only once. It was many, many years ago. At that time there was a popular anime called The Tennis Prince. After watching the anime he felt that it was very interesting, so he went to their school's tennis department to play. But to be honest, he didn't have any talent. He just understood the rules, that's all, but it doesn't matter now. With his physical fitness, except for billiards, which requires planning and may not produce miracles, he has no problem playing other things. No, don't get me wrong. Playing tennis is playing tennis, but the person who wants to play with you is not me, but him. Chapter 1065. Playing tennis with you is playing tennis, but the opponent is not me, but him. As Austin Walton stepped aside, a foreigner in a suit came from a distance with a smile on his face. Looking at his smiling face, many people next to him took a deep breath. Even Prawalton's face became ugly. Novak Djokovic, this guy is the current #1 in the tennis world. Prawalton whispered as she pulled Jiang Hai's sleeve. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at the man. This man is my friend. You can call him Novak. Novak, this is your enemy today. Looking at Prawalton's serious face, Austin Walton said with a proud face. He did have the right to be proud. At least no one would think that Jiang Hai might be the opponent of the current #1 player in the tennis world. Austin, what are you doing? You found a professional to compete with Jiang Hai. What's the point of winning? Looking at Austin Walton, Prawalton walked in front of him, raised her hands and looked at Austin Walton indifferently. Hearing her words, the people next to her also reacted. Indeed, Djokovic was the world's #1 in the tennis world. Even if he won, it would be an unfair victory. Jiang Hai, on the other hand, was just a novice. What was there to compare? A professional beating a novice. If this got out, Djokovic would feel very ashamed. The reason why he was here was very simple. He knew that although he was very popular now, athletes were always athletes. Their sports career was limited. Now that he was 30 years old, he needed to think about his own way out. Similar to Beckham, his wife was also a very powerful woman named Elena Ristic. It was through a friend of hers that he got to know Austin Walton. When Austin Walton said that he wanted him to do him a favor, he could not refuse. He could only bite the bullet and come over. Hearing this, he was even more embarrassed. However, there was nothing she could do. It seemed that Austin was not going to let her leave just because of this woman's words. Hey, Prawalton, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. We're just playing. It doesn't count as a win or a loss. Don't you think so, Jiang? Otherwise, are you scared? Austin Walton said in an extremely childish manner after hearing Prawalton's words. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai really wanted to give him the middle finger. What the hell was this? Why was it so melodramatic and Shinibu? Whether it was from the way things were arranged or the way they spoke, were all of their IQs below 80. The plot of slapping someone's face for the sake of slapping them was clearly a joke from 5 years ago. How did he encounter it today? If he said now, yeah, how can I beat the world's #1? I'd better eat. If that was the case, would Austin and the others be embarrassed? However, Prawalton would probably feel a little awkward. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai resisted the urge to say, I don't want to play anymore. Instead, he glanced at his opponent in front of him. To be honest, he was also quite embarrassed now. When he saw Jiang Hai looking over, he also smiled awkwardly. Come on, let's play a game for fun. Looking at his awkward appearance, Jiang Hai laughed. It didn't matter. Since they liked this kind of awkward atmosphere, he would play with them for a while. He had nothing to do anyway. Okay, there's a tennis court upstairs. Those who are interested can go and take a look. Hearing Jiang Hai's agreement, Austin and Brett looked at each other and then laughed. They seemed to have already seen Jiang Hai being defeated. However, even if Jiang Hai lost, it didn't matter. Jiang Hai didn't need fame. He wasn't in the professional sports circle. He wouldn't lose a piece of meat. These guys were a little inexplicable. Jiang Hai couldn't find it. Let's go. Hearing their words, Jiang Hai shook his head in his heart. If they want to play, then let them play. But to be honest, he really hadn't played tennis since he got the Dragon Balls. He was also a little curious. Do you want to change your clothes? Seeing Jiang Hai and Austin walk out, Prawalton immediately rushed over and whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Then Jiang Hai moved a little. It was indeed a little uncomfortable and a little tight, but it didn't matter. Wasn't Djokovic also wearing a suit? Why did he have to be so serious about it? The news that Jiang Hai was going to play with Djokovic quickly spread throughout the hotel. Not only did many people who came to the dinner party come to watch out of curiosity, but even the hotel staff came to watch and some even recorded it. When Jiang Hai and Djokovic stood on the court, everyone here was excited. The foundation of tennis in Wuxia was not very good. Although many people played it, it was far from basketball, football and other national sports. Although there was Lina in China, there were still very few people who could play tennis. However, tennis was quite popular in the United States. After all, there was one of the 4 Grand Slam tournaments, the US Open. Moreover, many of the ATP Masters tournaments were also in the United States, so tennis's foundation was quite good here. When Djokovic came on the court, the screams on the sidelines could be seen. As for Jiang Hai, to be honest, his favorite sport was basketball. Tennis was purely because of the cartoons he watched. He had almost forgotten what was shown in the cartoon because he did not watch it much after it changed from serious tennis to fantasy tennis. However, he still knew some of the basics. When he served, he had to hit the small square in the front half of the opponent's court. If he hit the line at the boundary, he would be considered in bounds. It was not like basketball where if he hit the line he would be considered out of bounds. There was also the posture of serving. Although he hadn't played it for a long time, he still had some memories. Let's play BO3. Best of 3. You serve first. Djokovic was a little embarrassed to be watched by others, so after both of them came on the court, he first threw the tennis ball to Jiang Hai and then whispered. He wanted to end the battle quickly. Jiang Hai naturally had no objection. He didn't know how strong he was, right? Jiang Hai and Djokovic's playing style was not like the 6 games and tiebreakers seen on TV. It was very simple. There were a total of 3 service games such as 15-0, 30-0 and 40-0. Then they would win 1 game. Best of 3. It was very simple. It didn't take long, at least in his opinion. Okay. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Then he took the tennis ball and walked to his own service area. Compared to Djokovic, who brought his own exclusive tennis racket, Jiang Hai's was much simpler. He just took one casually with a tighter string. Then he stood in position and threw a tennis ball high over. In an instant, all the strength in his body was concentrated in his right hand. Aiming at the tennis ball in the air, he made a split spike serve and hit it directly over. Pa! There was a loud noise. It was not a good sound. The tennis ball was like a cannonball. Everyone couldn't see the tennis ball clearly. They only felt that they saw a phantom, just like in anime. When the tennis ball was hit, it disappeared instantly and then a phantom appeared. Then there was a loud noise. The tennis ball had disappeared, but on the ground in front of Djokovic, there was a small pit. On the wall behind him, a tennis ball was directly embedded in the wall. After a while it slowly fell down. What is this? Looking at the falling tennis ball and the pits on the ground and walls, everyone couldn't help but shut their mouths. How could such a situation happen? The ground and walls here were all made of cement. Cement? What was the probability of making 2 pits on the cement ground and walls? How fast was the speed of the serve just now? Many of the people who were recording immediately rewound the video because they really didn't understand it. They didn't understand it at all. This happened in front of their eyes. This can't be a movie stunt. What's going on? 15-0. Maybe it was because of the voices of the people behind him that the temporary referee was awakened. He shouted and then signaled Jiang Hai to serve. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also started to serve the ball again. As for Djokovic, he also shook his head and forced himself to calm down. He really didn't think that the opponent turned out to be a heavy shooter. In the world of tennis, heavy shooters are quite common. They are very talented in serving. They are tall and strong, but these people are not very agile. He may not lose. Although it seems that Jiang Hai's serve may be more powerful than the world's strongest heavy shooter, he is still prepared to fight for his future. Well, 20% of the strength is not bad. Now let's try 40%. After hearing the referee's words, Djokovic also reacted. Jiang Hai said with a smile. Then, under Djokovic's incredulous gaze, Jiang Hai threw the tennis ball high and then hit it directly with a faster speed. Whoosh, slap, slap. This time it was even more terrifying. The tennis ball didn't even have a phantom. The moment Jiang Hai's racket hit the tennis ball disappeared. Then there were two sounds. When Djokovic and the others reacted, they saw that the small hole that was created by the tennis ball had become deeper. Almost a quarter of the tennis ball was embedded in the wall. After a long time it slowly fell down. Djokovic and the others reacted. They saw that the small hole that was created by the tennis ball had become deeper. Chapter 1066. What the hell is this? What the hell is this? What the hell is this? Important things had to be repeated 3 times. At this time, not only Djokovic but even the people who came to watch the game were dumbfounded. They looked at Jiang Hai. They really didn't know this guy. And what the hell was that serve? What kind of serve could make the ball disappear? That F***king exceeded the speed of sound. Austin and Brett, who were in the crowd, also glanced at Jiang Hai. They couldn't help but shrink their necks. This Jiang Hai was too terrifying. What kind of person could have such strength? This guy couldn't be a robot or an alien in human skin, right? 30-0? Although the referee was also stunned, he still reacted and said after rubbing his eyes, 30-0? Still in that position, 60% strength. Looking at the stunned crowd, Jiang Hai looked at Djokovic in front of him and said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Djokovic licked his lips and then moved to that position. He was the world's number one, the world's number one. He couldn't admit defeat so easily. He had to at least fight back. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. Then he put the racket there and looked at Jiang Hai in front of him. Jiang Hai didn't try to frame Djokovic. He still hit the same position and threw the tennis ball high. Then Jiang Hai exerted his strength and whipped the tennis ball in midair. Just like before, after a sonic boom, the tennis ball disappeared. Then, in an instant, the small hole in front of Djokovic deepened. At the same time, the racket in his hand flew away. Because the tennis ball changed direction this time, it didn't hit the wall just now. Instead, it hit another position. This time it sank a quarter of the way into the wall and then slowly fell down. Seeing this scene in his trembling right hand, Djokovic was really dumbfounded. Even if you beat him to death, he still couldn't understand what was going on. This was not scientific at all. But there was no other way. Jiang Hai was also unscientific. When Djokovic was stunned, Jiang Hai had already taken the 4th ball. Now the score was 40-0. If Djokovic couldn't catch this ball, he would lose. Are you ready? Still in that position. Looking at Djokovic, Jiang Hai said with a smile while hitting the ball. Come on. The feeling of being crushed in front of Jiang Hai made Djokovic feel like he had gone berserk. After the victory and defeat came to his mind, he held the racket with both hands and made up his mind. This time he must guard against Jiang Hai. Come on, 80%. Seeing that Djokovic was ready, Jiang Hai took a deep breath and threw the ball high. In an instant, blue veins popped out on his right arm. He waved the racket and smashed it towards the tennis ball. Pop. With an explosion, the tennis ball disappeared in an instant. In less than 0.1 seconds, almost the moment the tennis ball disappeared, the pit on the cement ground in front of Djokovic sank a little and expanded a little. In an instant, a huge force came from Djokovic's hand. He could only clench his teeth and try to hold on. He didn't hope to hit the ball back, but he just hoped that the racket wouldn't fly away. His persistence was rewarded. With both hands holding the racket didn't fly away this time, but he still couldn't stop the ball. Although the racket didn't fly away, the net wire couldn't withstand Jiang Hai's serve. Yes, just like watching a cartoon, when Jiang Hai served, the racket in Djokovic's hand on the other side exploded from the middle and penetrated. Yes, Jiang Hai's serve directly penetrated the racket in front of him. There was no chance at all. The good thing was that the audience could finally see the tennis ball this time. After penetrating the racket, the speed of the tennis ball finally slowed down, allowing people to see the process of the tennis ball hitting the wall. At this time, Djokovic's trembling hands also told everyone that he had lost. 1-0 change serve. Seeing that the ball was played, the referee swallowed a mouthful of saliva, but he still said seriously. However, just as he finished speaking, Djokovic had already thrown the racket in his hand to the ground. I admit defeat. What a joke. The racket was smashed. He didn't think that he could last another round against Jiang Hai. He knew very well that if he didn't recuperate for 10 days to half a month, he might not even be able to hold the cup steadily. Wow. Hearing Djokovic's words, everyone here couldn't help but exclaim. Originally, they came here to watch Djokovic abuse people, but they didn't expect that it would turn into watching Djokovic being abused. Who is that Asian man? Why is he so strong? Almost instantly, everyone was discussing the existence of Jiang Hai. To be honest, they had never seen or even heard of such a tennis player in their life. However, Jiang Hai didn't care about them. He walked over and patted Djokovic's arm. He returned the racket and then walked to the crowd. Looking at Jiang Hai's back, Djokovic smiled helplessly. He lost too miserably. Jiang Hai didn't mean to care about his mood. He just smiled and walked to the front of the crowd. The onlookers subconsciously opened up a path for them. Many of them were even recording the scene. Fortunately, this time, the hotel could be said to be the Walton family's security personnel, and all of them had been dispatched. They dispersed these people and let Jiang Hai walk into the crowd. However, although Jiang Hai disappeared, the topic of these people's discussion didn't disappear. Some people even directly posted the video on the internet. The video was discovered as soon as it went online. Because the current number one in the tennis world, Djokovic, the video was quickly watched by many people. But after watching it, everyone's first thought was that this was a special feature of the computer. Because the ball that Jiang Hai played was clearly not something that could be played by humans. It was really scary to think about a completely disappearing serve. There were even some people who calculated a formula. If the things in the video were true, then Jiang Hai's serve would be more than 300 meters per second. What does 300 meters per second mean? Nowadays, serves were basically calculated according to a kilometer per hour. At present, the fastest serve in the tennis world was Isner, 253 kilometers per hour. If it was calculated according to Jiang Hai's speed of 300 meters per second, it would be 1,080 kilometers per hour. What does this mean? How fast is a high-speed railway? How fast is a plane? Jiang Hai's serve was close to the speed of sound? In fact, it was close to the speed of sound. Because when Jiang Hai played, there was a sonic boom before the ball was sent out. So, it was inevitable that there was no sound. However, this speed was also completely impossible. So basically, everyone on the internet thought that Jiang Hai's serve was fake and that it was a movie special effect. But when many of the same videos were posted on the internet, these people were a little embarrassed because there were really people who saw it with their own eyes. At the same time, there were also people who dug up news about Jiang Hai. The billionaire of Boston Winthrop, who once performed at the NBA All-Star Game, was also dug up by others. Such a guy naturally attracted a lot of attention. Especially in China, more people knew about Jiang Hai, but these people were just looking. Those who really knew Jiang Hai would not talk nonsense. At this time, Jiang Hai did not know this. After Djokovic admitted defeat, he went to eat German pork knuckle. After Prawalton talked and laughed with everyone for a while, she also went to find Jiang Hai. "Dear, you are really amazing. Watching you play, I have some feelings." Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton sat beside him, took his hand and whispered. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Indeed, these words are really stimulating and will make a man have a special feeling. "Then, do you want me to treat you now?" Looking at Prawalton, Jiang Hai whispered. "It's better not. The dinner is about to start, but I guess you won't be able to sleep tonight." Glancing at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said with a smile. After the two ate some food together, the Walton family's dinner officially began. But to be honest, for people in the business world, the Walton family's dinner is naturally very important. This is not only an opportunity to make friends with influential people, but also an opportunity to curry favor with the Walton family. Almost no one will go against the Walton family's Walmart because no matter what you do, it is basically related to the supermarket. You are a cattle farmer, a fruit farmer, a vegetable farmer, a light industrial worker, makeup, facial cleanser, wine maker, food maker, and even toilet seat maker. All of these are inseparable from this group. So, to curry favor with this family is actually a very important thing for everyone. But among these people, Jiang Hai is not included. Jiang Hai's appearance is giving them a lot of face. So at the dinner, after Roberson Walton finished speaking, Jiang Hai's mouth basically did not stop. Good wine, good food, one after another, he ate a lot. Prawalton is naturally not next to him, she also has a guest to accompany. Just when Jiang Hai was about to go back to his room to play with Cheryl Lee and the others, a figure came in front of him. This made Jiang Hai raise his head and look at him with some surprise. Chapter 1067. "Hi Jiang, can we talk?" Looking up, Jiang Hai looked at the person in front of him. Jiang Hai also knew this person. He is Prawalton's brother, Jack Walton. Of course. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai pointed to the seat in front of him and said. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jack Walton also smiled, then sat opposite him and waved his hand. Naturally, there were people from the Walton family who drove away other irrelevant people. This is the Walton family's banquet, so naturally no one will come to trouble him. I often hear my father and Prawalton talk about you, but this should be the first time we meet face to face. Looking at Jiang Hai, Jack Walton said. It is indeed the first time we meet. I also heard Prawalton talk about you. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Jiang, you know a little about our family? Looking at Jiang Hai, Jack Walton said to him. Listening to his endless words, Jiang Hai's mind also turned. He knew the purpose of this person's visit. As mentioned before, the Walton family's current situation is a bit of a shortage of young people. The second-generation children are already old, and among the third generation, the absolute candidate who can carry the flag has not appeared yet. At present, the most likely to take over as the chairman of Walmart is Jack Walton and Cooper Walton of Jim Walton's family. The only purpose of these two appearing in front of Jiang Hai is to win Jiang Hai's support. Jiang Hai is now an important guest of the Walmart group. He is a very important person. In such a case, his opinion, to some extent, could not only make the decision for PRA Walton, but also shake the hearts of other shareholders. However, compared to Cooper Walton, Jack Walton and PRA Walton had half the same blood. They had the same father but different mothers, so their relationship was indeed closer. That was why he took the initiative to talk to Jiang Hai, unlike Cooper Walton, who just came to show his face and then left. Unknowingly, he also talked with Jiang Hai for almost half an hour until Roberson Walton came to call him. Although he didn't say anything substantial to Jiang Hai, such as the benefits that will be given to Jiang Hai in the future, he talked a lot. Compared to others, his relationship with Jiang Hai is indeed closer and he knows more. After he finished speaking, Prawalton also came over and looked at Jiang Hai with a smile. He must be annoyed. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton whispered. Just now she was taken by her father to meet a lot of people. Of course, the only reason for this was to create time for Jack Walton and Jiang Hai to be alone. Prawalton, who knows what her father means, can't say anything because she is also on her father's side. This is also the reason why her father let her mess with Austin. He naturally knew that Jiang Hai played tennis today, but he didn't say anything, which is a tacit consent. After going back, Prawalton went to mess with Austin Walton. It seems that his favorite youngest son will have a harder time in the family in the future. It's okay. He didn't say anything messy. We just talked casually. Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He was telling the truth. Jack Walton really didn't say anything messy. He didn't say anything like I'll take care of you in the future or what I'll do when I'm in power. They just chatted casually. Therefore, Jiang Hai won't be disgusted. Although he is a loser and an otaku, he is not autistic. If the other party comes to talk to him without hostility, he will naturally talk. As long as the topic doesn't make him feel disgusted, it doesn't matter. Well, do you want to go back to Atlantic City with me tomorrow? Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't feel disgusted, Prawalton also nodded. She was most afraid that Jiang Hai would vent his anger on her because of her relatives. As long as he doesn't, it's the best. I won't go back tomorrow. I'm going back to the manor. Although there is nothing to do in the manor now, Jiang Hai still doesn't plan to go to Atlantic City. Prawalton and her girlfriends are crazy when they play. It's okay to play for a few days occasionally, but if they go all the time, Jiang Hai will be a little overwhelmed. Then we should go back and rest. Hearing that Jiang Hai isn't going, Prawalton pouted, but then she thought it through. She pulled Jiang Hai's arm and left. Looking at their backs, no one knew what the others were thinking. But after Jiang Hai goes back, he probably won't be able to sleep tonight. Sure enough, when they returned to the room, Jiang Hai found that these girls are already prepared. He doesn't know if it's because Prawalton taught them well, but these girls are quite enthusiastic about that kind of thing. Although in Jiang Hai's house, everyone will wear some seductive clothes to seduce Jiang Hai, but more importantly, they want Jiang Hai to transform into a wolf and let him take the initiative. They are just obedient. Whatever Jiang Hai says, they will use the method of mixing their bodies to make Jiang Hai feel comfortable, but these girls are more wild. They will take the initiative. After seeing Jiang Hai and Prawalton come in, these girls directly began to help Jiang Hai take off his clothes without saying a word. As soon as something that can't be traced comes out, it will be directly snatched and swallowed into their mouths. They don't even need Jiang Hai to do it, they will do it themselves. In addition, they will not let anyone rest at all. Generally, a battle is divided into front, middle, and back, but they don't. The battle will be white-hot at the beginning, and it will be white-hot at the end until everyone is exhausted. This is why Jiang Hai loves and hates them. It was a silent night. To be exact, it was not until noon of the next day. When Jiang Hai got up again, it was already past 11 o'clock. After getting up, he found that the beauties around him have disappeared for a long time. Looking at the card on the bedside, Jiang Hai smiled. After putting the card away, he went to take a bath. After having lunch in the hotel, Jiang Hai drove his car towards Winthrop. After several hours of driving, Jiang Hai returned to the manor before dinner. After coming back, although it has only been a few days, the girls in Jiang Hai's manor were very happy. After having dinner together as usual, after Delina, Marian, and Taraga took a bath, they also took a bath together. Nobody knew what would happen during the bath, because Jiang Hai's bathroom was also covered. At night, hugging his favorite girls, Jiang Hai fell asleep peacefully. The next morning, when Jiang Hai woke up, he looked at the familiar ceiling in front of him and felt the familiar body beside him. At the same time, Jiang Hai revealed a smile. This was the environment that he was most familiar with. After taking a bath, he started to do what he did every day. First, he went to look at the horses and feed them. Then he visited the pasture, the wharf, and the wine manor. After coming back, he would play with the cats and dogs for a while. After making tea, he would rest under the shade of a big tree and play with his mobile phone. This was his life and he liked it very much. To be honest, who wouldn't like such a life? The following days once again returned to peace. Indeed, Jiang Hai didn't have any desire to pursue excitement or to upgrade himself. What he wanted to do was to live each day peacefully and enjoy his current life. That's all. As for what would happen in the future, it had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. He also didn't have the time or energy to think about it. It had nothing to do with him right now. His path of retreat, everything was already clear to him. He had never thought of changing the world, changing the country, changing the people, or even changing himself. He did not have the desire to help the world, nor did he have the intention to learn the civil and martial arts to sell to the imperial family. He was Jiang Hai, an extremely ordinary person. He lived according to his own thoughts and ideas. It was as simple as that. In the blink of an eye, June had passed and July was almost over. The sun in Winthrop was getting hotter and hotter. Summer had officially arrived. Compared to basking in the sun outside, Jiang Hai preferred to stay in the room and enjoy the air conditioning. Winthrop was located in the north. Although the summer in the north wasn't as hot as in the south, it wasn't bad for Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's women would go to the vegetable field or the vineyard in the morning when it wasn't too hot. After that, they would come back and stay at home for the whole day. Except for Delina, Marian, and Taraga, who would still wear pajamas, the others were basically wearing very light clothes. Sometimes they would only wear a thin gauze or nothing at all. When Jiang Hai asked them to wear clothes, they would directly rub themselves against him. Indeed, there was nothing that couldn't be solved with one round of sex. If there was, then 2 rounds. If there was, then 3 rounds. There would always be a time when Jiang Hai would be too tired to care about them. Well, this was indeed a way. Jiang Hai couldn't do it. At this time, Chili called Jiang Hai. She was coming over soon. Chapter 1068. The airport in Boston. Because it was always described, Jiang Hai was too lazy to look at it. He was really familiar with it. Early this morning, he drove his car and appeared on the outskirts of the airport, waiting for the arrival of Chili. Chili came this time because she had found a successor, but she simply wanted to give herself a vacation. Everyone else has paid leave, let alone her. After the company really had nothing important to do recently, she also had the idea of going to Jiang Hai's place, so she called and booked a time. She will come today. This time, she didn't need to take a civil plane, but she took Jiang Hai's private plane. It was really because the plane was parked there and there was nothing to do, so it was better to let them pick up people. Even if this time only picking up 2 people, Jiang Hai doesn't care. It doesn't matter if the plane is empty, it's not like he doesn't have the gas money. Soon, Jiang Hai's mobile phone received a text message. Qi Li and Du Ning have already got off the plane and arrived at Boston International Airport. Not long after, 2 women with suitcases came out of the airport terminal. Jiang Hai recognized the 2 at first sight and immediately began to wave, and the 2 also sped up their pace. "Hi, it's too hot. I thought it would be cooler here in Boston." As soon as she walked to Jiang Hai's side, Qi Li complained. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help laughing. She really thought too much. The latitude here is about the same as the capital. How can it be cooler, but it can be better in the manor? If you still feel hot, we can sail to the sea to play. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. "That's a good idea. Let's go. I can't wait to go to your home. Of course, I can also see my 2 sisters on the way." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also said with a smile, but Jiang Hai had no other choice but to smile awkwardly. As for Du Ning, he just looked at this pair with a smile and didn't interrupt. "Let's go, let's go." After taking their luggage and putting it away, Jiang Hai wisely changed the topic and drove to Winthrop. It took about 20 minutes to drive from Jiang Hai's manor to the center of Winthrop. It took about an hour and a half to get from the manor to Boston. In fact, a normal car ride would take 2 hours. However, the monitoring facilities on the roads in the United States were quite bad. This was also a place that was far inferior to China. In the United States, except for some public places, there were very few cameras installed. This was because in the eyes of Americans, it was a violation of privacy and freedom. On the highway, although there would be traffic police from time to time, there were very few cameras installed on the road. For example, a few years ago, there was a very popular photo of someone touching something while driving. If this happened in China, it would be a scandal for that person. That person would lose his job because of this. But if this happened in the United States, then the traffic police would definitely be sued. This was an infringement of a person's copyright and privacy. In the car, it is the person's own private space. He can do whatever he wants. If he violates the rules, he will be fined, but if he is exposed, then this person will sue the traffic police department and the compensation will be hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. So in the United States, there are few cameras on the road. Jiang Hai has been here for more than 3 years. Naturally, he is quite familiar with this road that he often travels. He naturally knows where there are cameras, where there are no cameras, and where to drive faster. With the excellent power of his car, a 2-hour drive can be reduced to an hour and a half. As Jiang Hai's car arrived in front of the gate, the artificial intelligence has automatically recognized Jiang Hai's image and opened the gate. Jiang Hai also drove to his parking lot. After the car stopped, Jiang Hai helped Qi Li and Du Ning take their luggage. The two have already stepped into Jiang Hai's villa. But once they entered, they couldn't help but be shocked. Because at this time in Jiang Hai's room, except for Delina, Marian, and Taraga, there is a sea of white and red. Qijia, Chia, Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunshan, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Sheila, Ohilia, Bridget, Janice, Azalina, Wallace, Shelley, Ariel, and because of the company's holiday today, 19 of the 22 girls in the room are red. They are either lying, leaning, or standing. After seeing Qi Li and Du Ning come, they can't help but stand up. Some of them stood in place and looked at her timidly, and some of them directly greeted her, especially Qijia, Chia, Feng Yunshan, and Ai Xiaoxi. These 4 girls are quite miserable because of Qi Li. If they don't come over now, when will they come over? So as soon as they saw Qi Li coming over, they came over with a smile. "Sister, you are finally here." Seeing Qi Li, Qijia couldn't help but say with a smile. "Wait, I've heard that Westerners are open-minded before, but I didn't think that they would be so open-minded. Are you having an open-minded meeting?" Seeing Qijia rushing over, Qi Li's eyes widened and she said with a look of surprise. "What meeting? It's not like what you said, we're just doing it because it's very hot." Hearing Qi Li's words, Qijia couldn't help but pat her, and then said with a displeased look, but Qi Li looked at her as if she was saying, "Are you kidding me? It's true, it's just because it's very hot, and Jiang Hai is monitored by intelligent systems all around so no one will peep. We are like this every day except for a little shyness at the beginning, it's very comfortable." Hearing Qi Li's words, Chia also said with a smile at this time. Looking at her sister who was like a snow fairy, Qi Li couldn't help but sigh. It's really not easy to learn bad things. How long has it been since they came here? She actually became like this. Come on, let them experience it and they will understand. Seeing that Qi Li and Du Ning were still a little reserved, Qijia didn't hesitate, and directly waved her hand, and the girls came over and began to help them release their natural instincts. When Jiang Hai came in with the luggage, Qi Li and Du Ning were almost undressed. Du Ning was better, she didn't resist, she smiled and let Azalina and the others take care of her, and then went to join them. However, Qi Li was still struggling, but it was useless, her clothes were still disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Jiang Hai, help. As soon as she saw Jiang Hai come in, Qi Li, who was only protecting the last 2 pieces of clothes, couldn't help but shout loudly. But after hearing her cry, Jiang Hai could only shrug. He could only say that he couldn't help in such a situation. After putting the luggage down, he came back and found that Qi Li had been stripped naked. At this time, she was sitting on the sofa with her legs exposed, protecting her body and glaring at the smiling guys around her. Well, since you're here, it means that you've accepted this situation. Jiang Hai has so many women, you can't always be mysterious. By the way, except for Du Ning, no one else has seen you do it. Since Jiang Hai is here, you can start now. Delina, Marian, Taraga, go back to your room or your pocket money will be deducted. Seeing Jiang Hai coming downstairs and the shy Qi Li, Qijie came over and said with a smile. After that, she forced the 3 little girls to go downstairs. The other women then pulled Jiang Hai over and removed Jiang Hai's clothes. "Hey Jiang Hai, are you really going to do this?" Looking at Jiang Hai, who was almost done with his preparations and was still being swallowed by several girls, Qi Li looked at her with a frightened face. "What's the matter?" Qi Li looked at Jiang Hai with a horrified face. "This is public opinion, public opinion?" Looking at the shy Qi Li in front of him, Jiang Hai didn't know what to think. After touching his head embarrassedly, he walked in front of Qi Li and lowered his head to kiss Qi Li's surprised lips. Of course, everything happened naturally. As for what happened next, of course it couldn't be described. In the afternoon, Jiang Hai's group stayed in the parlor until the evening. When the moonlight turned dark, they all felt a bit hungry. Chia then ordered them to prepare dinner. Jiang Hai's group of over 20 people also sat at the dining table in an orderly manner. At this time, Qi Li and Du Ning seemed to have accepted their fate. They were naked and played with the other girls. In the dining room, the only 4 people who were wearing clothes were Jiang Hai, Delina, and the other 2. Looking at the scenery in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He suddenly thought of his experience in the past 3 years. From the time he got the Dragon Balls, he sold them and bought a manor. Then he bought cows, raised fish, hired cowboys and fishermen. In order to get some unorthodox goods, he went to the underwater shipwreck to search for treasures. Then he met Du Feimin. Then he won a prize for beef and started to sell it. Then he became a man above others. What happened between him and Feng Yunshan at home for the first time? What happened when Feng Yunshan brought Ai Xiaoxi to Jiang Hai for a photo? What happened with Aphrodite and the others? In order to cover up Aphrodite and the others' situation, he met Qi Jie. What happened when Qi Jie brought Qia to the refugee ship overseas? What happened when he met Azalina? And what happened when Azalina took him to save Jelena and the others? Now, each scene was like a movie constantly replaying in front of Jiang Hai's eyes. Some people said that he was a loser. Now that he was rich, he was just a loser. He had no ambition, he didn't deserve the word dragon. But he wanted to say that this was him, this was his story, this was the life he wanted. People live for a lifetime, plants and trees for an autumn. What they wanted was nothing more than one word: pleasure. Jiang Hai didn't live for others. Therefore he felt that he was living a very good life, and that was enough. His current life couldn't help but remind him of a poem. From tomorrow onwards I will be a happy person. Feed horses, chop firewood and travel around the world. From tomorrow onwards I will care about food and vegetables. I have a house facing the sea. Spring is warm and flowers are blooming. From tomorrow onwards I will write to each of my relatives. I will tell them of my happiness. The lightning of happiness told me I will tell everyone. I will give each river and each mountain a warm name. My blessings to you too, dear readers. I wish you a bright future. I wish you a lover would find a wife. I wish you happiness in the mortal world. I only wish to face the sea with flowers blooming in spring. End of book. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.